What is up, people? So this is what we're gonna do. Go ahead and get that link up there. Let me see. Say what's up to you guys in the chat before I get started with anything. All right. What's up, B-Ball? What's up, Amy? How you doing? Good to see you here. B-Ball, hope you're still here and not at that other for so mentioned channel. Just kidding, man. What's up, Grizz? What's up, Sean Hawkins? Been a while, my friend. What's up, Crash? Still on the epic pineapple search, huh? I see. What's up, Carl? How you doing? What's up, Militant Manny's in the house? What's up, Bitter Devil? What's up? What's up, Blue Marble? How you doing, sir? What else I see? Barney's in the house, and yes, Barney, it will always be a force. What's up, RT? And I think that's it for right now. What's up, C4? Haven't seen you in a while. What's up, Fred? And I think that is it for now. Let's see who else? My stupid stream bot. Oh, what's up, GPS? Oh, shit, seek and find. What's up, John S? How you guys doing? All right. Go ahead and get the link out there to you guys. I wanted to make sure my mic works. See, it does, so I'm happy there. All right, get the link out there for you guys, and we'll see where we go. What I wanted to do today is kind of, we're going to pretty much do, the open topic, same as usual, but one of the things I noticed, and I was listening to a podcast last night, and I think there's so much talk of, conspiracy deniers and or not conspiracy deniers, but conspiracy theorists and chemtrail this and all that other stuff that it's almost like it's almost more far-fetched for a lot of, in my opinion, for people to be conspiracy deniers than these crazy conspiracy theorists. Now, granted, pretty much the reason why, people like myself feel that, I get like ostracized for different conspiracies I think about, because they don't get a chance to hear my side, so they hear all these other off the wall conspiracies that, like, just so far fetched. There's no evidence behind it. Like one document misconstrued is all that's there, or something like that. It makes, people like myself who are giving real information out, like geoengineering and all that stuff, really difficult, because what happens is no one wants to hear the word chemtrail. So I've completely stopped using it. But at the same time, it gives conspiracy deniers the upper hand, because they now use this one little term to depict how a conspiracy is real or not. And the realization is, hey, guess what, guys? They do chemtrail. How do I know? Because it's not just contrail that comes out of planes these days. Now, who's doing it? Why they're doing it? Those are up for debate. No, I don't think they're little robots that they're trying to infect people with. Guess why? It'd be easier just to do it when you go to the doctors. So, with that said, and if you really want to think about it on a higher level of that, think about it this way. Why do you think the majority of the people don't go to the hospital? You do know that you have to have insurance these days. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Fred says, problem with chemtrails is every tard calls every single contrail a chemical trail. Yeah, that's the issue. That it really muffles the real information going on. If you go outside and you think every single cloud is a chemtrail, and then I come on and I'm trying to explain to you how they want to spray sulfates in this sky to blanket the earth, to block out the sun's radiation, the UV rays, you're going to look at me like I'm crazy, because you just got done hearing someone talk about mini robots that are going to be implanted into your brain for whatever reason. I don't even know. It's ridiculous to me. And it's frustrating. More, like I said, it's frustrating because I have a lot of information that's going to be coming out soon, especially once it gets started. The Scope X project, and the realization is that I gotta dodge and weave all this other crap that's going to really play a factor in this, and play a factor in the information I get out and what people find out. Like I was saying, who's going to be doing it? It's going to be military. Why? Because the military doesn't have to bid war for it. They get the governance for it, especially America. Then what do they get here? They don't have to worry. Countries' militaries usually get the most funding, typically. So that's why, if it's going to happen, it's going to be that way. Definitely, there's no commercial airlines that's doing chemical trails or is going to do the Scope X test, because one thing matters to them: money. Delta, Southwest, they're not going to spray for nobody without money in the bank. My bad, actually muted myself. And one of the best parts about like what I'm doing when it comes down to letting you guys know is I also go to this website. I'm gonna go ahead and share it with you guys so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Nope, I don't want to share that one. Is that Climate Viewer Maps. It basically gives you a real good idea of where things are going on, how things are perceived in the media. Mainly, I say in the media because what he does is he locates a lot of these stuff, and you're able to actually get a chance to hear and see where these things are happening. I'm trying to get to fit the page real quick. All right. Very cool. Then I'll go ahead and share this. This is it right here. This is Climate Viewer Map. The reason I wanted to show you guys this, actually I wanted a different map, is the choices you get out of this. It's not just, these little small maps and everything. It gives you an opportunity to figure out what you were looking for one. This historical stuff, this current. For instance, if you, I'll give you guys a few examples, and then you guys can see what I mean, and if you have questions about it, or think it's not how it is, definitely have something to talk about. So this is a little list, basically, weather modification history, climate viewer news is like special reports that he does. Climate viewer reports is I like. It's kind of sketchy in the sense of this is anybody can add to this map, showing locations and things that are going on. The part I like about it is that there are actually verified and non-verified reports, so you're not having to strum through so damn many of them. But for the reason we're here, I wanted to go to Earth Monitor. Basically, you get to see any you got any questions, anything you want to figure out what's going on. This is where I usually start. I say where I start because it's not going to give me everything, but it's definitely going to give me a good idea of what's going on and where I need to be looking. When I was doing a lot of research on the HARP, one of the things I didn't realize right away is that I was looking at it as HARP being an entity, an agency. And what happens is when you're searching for this stuff, you're looking for documents from HARP. Guess what? You're not going to ever see them because HARP isn't an agency. It's technology. It's the stuff they're using. And once I realized that and really started diving deep into it, that's when stuff like, where is it? Satellites. This is like when all the Doppler stuff and AWAPs started coming out. And that's how you start finding out where to look, where they're not, you don't hear about it all the time. But yeah, this is a really cool map that you can just find almost anything. I'm just kind of just BSing through it until someone jumps in the panel. If not, then it will continue on to a different let me see what's out there. Different narrative of how to do this stream. Let's see if I can find something that would be good to go to. If you guys see something on here and want me to, make sure you tag me and I'll look through. I was looking on here earlier because I was trying to find a couple of oil spill things and all that stuff because they're not, obviously almost no one ever hears about oil spills, but I mean I'm going to say at least 100 a day, ranging in the amount that it happens, but let me just find it real quick. Let's Google it. Oil spills. Interactive map, environmental disaster. Go with that one. All right, so Fred says, okay, seriously, it's the most I will give you is 9/11, and that is that they ignored the warnings because they didn't think it was a valid threat. How about this? How about saying this, Fred? It was definitely ignored, but for the sake of entering Middle East. What's up, Barney? How you doing, sir?
Hello. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty damn good. Just I was just thinking like all the things we talk about, and the one thing I've always noticed is that there's always what I call conspiracy deniers everywhere, and it's kind of just weird to me because I know a lot of them think they always go to the the real depth of the pool to get to where they believe the conspiracy is, and sometimes it sounds flat earthish. But believe it or not, I think in my opinion, there are far more conspiracies happening than a lot of people are willing to admit.
We've been down that road before. Yes, I agree. There are far more conspiracies happening that we know of, or that we are aware of, or that even get uncovered and prosecuted, right?
Mm-hmm.
But are there known conspiracies? Is it how do you get your epistemic validation that you know about something about some of those conspiracies?
Yeah, but I guess we did kind of talk about that where you can only even get so much, and it's always going to be your paper trail versus what what really happened. But what about? I think what we were talking about before was like was the weather modification stuff. But what about just technology in general? You know, the whole technology is way advanced than we know. How do you feel about that one?
Define way more advanced, right?
Okay, 10, 15 years ahead of us.
Military technology, yes,
But doesn't it
but
all
that's
eventually make its way to the civilian from military
yes, yes, it
or
does eventually.
government? Yeah.
Well, not all.
Yeah, no, no,
There are technologies from the 50s which are not disclosed yet.
yeah. Well, because like a lot of I know they use the military as like the test bed for a lot of stuff. Mainly probably because they don't have to pay for it, or you know what I mean. It's like it's always is it too much for people to have? Is it dangerous for them to have it versus us? You know. So I know that'd be a reason why the military tests a lot of stuff. But better yet, what did you mean by stuff in the 50s that's still not disclosed?
Well, we know of some projects. We even have descriptions of some projects, like including the stuff that Feynman was working on, which are still classified. Like we know what he was working on, we know what the consequences of his work are, but the project itself is classified. You don't know how it works. Mainly about nuclear weaponry, how to contain, how to maximize the yield, how to like those things are research in the 40s and 50s that literally is undisclosed. We know it exists, we know what it does, we don't know how it does it.
Yeah, well, I would put that,
Right.
or you could put that one under the better that society doesn't know, or doesn't have that the access to that information. That's very
Yeah.
good.
The like the stuff in computing, like the Enigma project, the Bletchley Park projects were unclassified like literally 10 years ago or something like that. And that's mechanical computers from the 40s, right? So that's not technology that wasn't available to the public. The public far surpassed the technology which was classified, but
But
it was
when
still classified.
is that in a sense more because back then they weren't able to encrypt it?
Well, that was crypt breaking technology. Right? The work of Alan Turing and have you ever heard of the Bletchley Park?
No, I haven't.
Have you ever heard of the Enigma machine?
Mm, I think I have, but I've never looked into it.
So the Germans had a crypting machine, which was a bunch of spools of wires, which worked in a way that you pressed, like you had a typewriter, you pressed the key, and some letter would light up, and you wrote down that letter. And
Oh, okay.
when you typed out your message, you would write out the message by the lights that it would light up, and that's the message that you would transmit. Whoever had an Enigma machine, if they knew which initial settings you put in and all of that, they could then decipher that information. So
Ah,
the British got their hands on one of those, and the so they could decipher the technology, but they still couldn't decipher the initial codes. Right? They couldn't decipher the setup, and basically they took the greatest geniuses of mathematics and automation of that time. One of them was Alan Turing, which literally during that project and around that project built the foundations for everything computer-wise that we use today. He is literally the definition of what a computer is. His work, right?
Yeah.
How computers work, what is computational completeness, how, and he did a lot of work into AI and stuff like that. So there is a famous test which is called the Turing test, which tests whether a computer can pass for a human. Is it intelligent enough? Is it sentient enough to be considered a human or be indistinguishable from a human, right?
Isn't
And
that
stuff like that.
isn't that what the what do you call it? Like that new technology that came out. I don't think it's new now, but it was a certain type of technology that came out where it was like AI was able to sound almost exactly like for instance, I think it was Obama, the one I saw. Like, but the problem it had is it wasn't able to carry like the cadence of somebody. You know, like the way they talk.
That's being upgraded like literally daily. There's a great YouTube channel which is run by the professor of artificial intelligence from Vienna. The channel is called 2 Minute Papers, where he 2 Minute Papers, where he goes through current, like literally the papers in the field of AI and AI research and computational research that have been published in the last couple of days, and he breaks them down, just presents what they're about in layman terms in 2 or 3 minutes, like nothing complicated, nothing too deep, just this now exists, this is now possible, here's a demonstration, here's how they've done it, moving on, right? It's like that's a great channel to be subscribed to if you want to keep tabs on where AI research is.
Okay, so it's only AI stuff that he's talking about.
Yeah, he is literally, he is the professor of AI research at the University of Vienna.
Okay.
That's his field.
Then that makes sense to why it's only AI stuff.
Yeah.
See, I'm trying to. Okay, yeah. Yeah, this is all the stuff I was talking about. Yep.
Yep. Like everything that you know about AI will be on his channel, and it will like that's usually the first place where it will be public or live, because he is pulling it directly from the source. That's his field of expertise, and he's just a cool young guy who has decided to share his field of work with the world, like unfiltered.
Yeah, this face recognition stuff is crazy.
Face recognition, face simulation, image generation, voice generation, 3D modeling by AI. There's also some good stuff on computer file, though it's sparse and far apart, and it's usually it's made to explain, to illustrate more than explain, right? So you will get the notion of what it is, but not how it works. There's also a great channel by Miles. What's his name? About general AI and general AI security. I just need to find him. Where he goes like literally through what the problems of Robert Miles, and the channel's name is Robert Miles, where he goes through what the problems of general AI and general AI is an artificial intelligence which is not intended for any specific task, but which is generally intelligent like humans are.
Well, isn't it?
Right?
Well, isn't it a whole idea that eventually they'll be? It's not. Is it smarter or? I forget what it is, but they were. I know they were. I was listening to a podcast, and you were talking about how in say like 15 to 20 years, AI would have caught up to us. And I didn't really get what that meant.
There is a problem in general AI security, which is called the singularity, which is, well, what can you do when you have a general AI? You can, like, we have general AI. What do? One of the things that we do is we write software. We create AIs, right?
Yeah.
And we create better and better AIs. When you have a general AI and you give it a problem to solve, one of the venues that it can take to solve the problem, instead of trying to tackle the problem itself, it can try to write a better AI to solve the problem. And that AI can then write a better AI to solve the problem. And that AI can then write, and as they get more powerful and better at it, you have this kind of ever accelerating increase in intelligence of the general AI, where, yes, as soon as you have something that is hypothetically are equal, at that point, you suddenly have something that is entirely godlike in its intelligence.
Well, then in that case, so the idea is once an AI stops creating other AIs to solve a problem, when it figures out how to solve it itself.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, once the task of solving the problem becomes so trivial that it's simpler to solve the problem than write a better AI to solve the problem.
Well, isn't it?
But
Isn't that
the thing is that if that happens, like if such a scenario comes about, you will get an exponential curve, right? The first AI will take a couple of hours to write the next AI. The next AI will take a couple of minutes to write the next AI, which will take a couple of seconds to write the next AI, and each will be an order of magnitude greater intelligence than the one before it, right?
But does
And that's where the singularity happens. Singularity in the sense of, and we cannot possibly imagine what happens next, because then you literally have a real physical God.
Well, at the same time, but so for instance, if we're just talking about that, if there's a course of different, AIs, so we'll say in order of 10 of them, doesn't AI 1 have to be programmed to do that task? Or not that task, or that has to solve anything, it has to still be in that realm of its task. So they're all doing the same thing, or staying in the task, but not. You know what I mean? So
yes, but those are the problems of general AI. If it's a general AI, you don't program it, right? Like when you want me to do something for you, you don't program me. You tell me what you want me to do, right? And I have my faculties at my disposal to solve the problem that you have given me.
Yeah, okay, but if I created an AI, and its purpose is to answer physics questions, isn't the difference between it quote unquote catching up or being as smart, or wouldn't that be able to then solve a mathematical question that has nothing to do with physics, like on its own?
It depends whether it's a general AI or is it a specific JI, right? Specific AI. Right?
Well,
Specific AI are the specific AIs are what we're doing now, and those are neural networks which have one and only one problem to solve,
yeah,
and are intelligent in solving that problem in a specific way, or using a specific method, or even finding the way to solve that problem. But that's not general AI. That's not intelligence. That's not consciousness. That's just most AIs that we have today we don't program them. AIs are not programmed. AIs are evolved.
Don't they start as a program? This is what you do. This is
You
run.
you have programs which build AI, right?
Oh, okay. It's not told what to do. It's given either a task or a processor that doesn't, an endless processor. I don't know what you'd say.
Well, it's given a point to complete, and then once it completes, then it has a stop, and then it's picked up again if the task is given to it again, then it has a stop. And with the general AI, there is no stop. There is only task after task after task that it completes. That's kind of what the problem is that if a general AI would get to the point where it could complete any task at any given time, because like Barney said, if it continues to evolve, it gets faster and faster and faster at it. It's just building more tools.
I see.
Okay, let's take a step back. Current AI, how are they made? So let's say you want to have an AI which will identify cats or discern whether there is a cat on a photo, right? Mm-hmm. So you take a bunch of nodes, a convolutional network, a bunch of mathematical operations which will go through the image, do some math, literally some random math on it, which will result in a number, right? Mm-hmm. And that number, like, you will have a bunch of nodes which are interconnected, which are interrelated, but you don't really know nor care what each node does or how it calculates. What you do is you give it a picture, and if it guesses correctly that that's a cat, you say, yes, here's another picture, right? And if it says no, and you say, no, that's wrong, let's clone you a couple of thousand times, change some of the math which is in those nodes, tweak some numbers or tweak some mathematical operations, just change you a tiny little bit, and like clone you 1,000 times, in each one of them randomly change a tiny little bit, and then see what they do, right? So the first generation of AI will be completely random, and you will get gibberish from them. But as you iterated that process, each time removing the worst ones and keeping the best ones, cloning them, tuning them a little bit, just tweaking them a little bit, then removing the worst ones, cloning the best ones, tweaking them a little bit, you get evolution. The things which remain in that set are things which, by random chance, by literal unnatural selection, by selection of those that can recognize cats, you end up with a neural network which is good at recognizing cats, right? Now that's a specific AI. If you give that AI a task to recognize a cat, give it a picture and ask it whether there is a cat there, it'll give you a very, very accurate response and will find them no matter what, about the lighting or the color or the whatever, right? But if you ask it what is the best way to pour water into a glass, it doesn't comprehend that question. That's a nonsensical thing to ask that AI. A general AI is an AI which possesses real intelligence, a thing where you can ask it a question that it has never encountered before, and it can either answer it by reasoning, or it can find a way to acquire the information and process it so that it could answer your question. Or perform a task, right? That's a general AI, a thing which is not built for a specific person, for a specific purpose, but for just being generally intelligent, like we are. Okay?
Wasn't IBM had their general AI? I think it was IBM. They were showcasing it for a little bit.
That's not a general. There are no general AIs in the world yet today.
What about that one that became a citizen somewhere?
Those are that's a robot, but it's not a general AI. It's a conversational bot. It is a specific bot whose job is to carry a conversation. It's like Siri, right?
Wait, so there are no, in general, oh, you said there are no general. So the term AI doesn't even mean a robot. It could just be a computer system.
It could be a program, an algorithm, yeah.
Okay, because I always put the two together. I always imagine that if you're talking AI, you're talking about some type of computer being. I don't even know how you say it. I always think there's a face or at least a structure to it. In my it's just I don't do computers, so when I'm thinking these things, it's not, I don't even have a knowledge of it. So that's just what pops into my head when I think about it.
A robot is just a machine which can autonomously perform a task. And again, you have specific and autonomous robots, right? If you have what are they called, the little Roombas, right? Roombas are robots. They are robots by every definition of the word. They do not have. Yeah, they don't possess any intelligence, or they have no AI.
Yeah, it remembers.
Or maybe the new ones do, but
basically remembers the path, and then it hears the last time.
It has an algorithm. So AIs do not have an algorithm. Programs have an algorithm. Algorithm is just a series of steps which you repeat to solve a problem, where each step is written and defined by a human, or right? Mm-hmm. Do this. If this, then do this. If this, then do this. If this, then do this. And you run through the list, right? Yeah. Go through. Yeah, that's an algorithm.
Variables. I'm looking at my chat bot and I'm realizing, oh yeah, well, those are the variables.
Yeah. If the value of this variable is this, then go to this subroutine or this function or this piece of program and start performing it from there. If you encounter this, if this variable changes in this way, then go here and right. So that's an algorithm. That's a strictly defined tree of logical choices and actions that can be performed. Most of the software that you know runs through algorithms.
Don't we run through algorithms?
No.
Why? You get a cut, you put a Band-Aid on it. You're thirsty, you drink water. I mean, there are things that your brain tells you to do that, kind of learn or whatever.
Yeah, but we perform algorithms, but we don't think in algorithms. Okay, we are not algorithms, right? Yeah. There is an algorithm for making lunch, right?
Mm-hmm, yep.
There is an algorithm for cooking spaghetti bolognese, which is a series of steps, but you are not following, you are emulating that algorithm. What you are actually doing is you are thinking and intuiting and kind of trying to conform to the algorithm, but no two people in the world, and not even yourself, if you do it twice, will perform that algorithm exactly the same way. You will take an extra step here, or you will pause in the middle, right?
Yeah,
so that's not following an algorithm.
Okay, so in a sense, we can't, or we can follow one. Okay, so you're saying we can follow one, but we will not always do the same step, whereas a computer program with an algorithm will.
Yes.
Okay.
Always invariably, right? You can copy it onto as many computers as you like and run it as many times as you like, and the algorithm will be the same. The variables within the algorithm can change, which might change its execution, but the algorithm will be one fixed algorithm. For AI, that's not quite like that.
Do you think? Because you said a minute ago that there are no general AIs. Is that
Yes.
Is that by choice, or do you think we're just not smart enough to create that?
Yes and yes. There is kind of a big push in the industry and in generally in the field of research to first figure out how to make it safe. Because if we do, like, because of the singularity problem and because there are other problems aligned with general AI security, I really advise to go watch at Robert Miles' channel. He goes through the OpenAI project entirely and kind of talks what the problems are and what the solutions are and stuff like that. But
Robert Miles, right?
yeah. Let's say, like you are giving it a task. How will it do what you want it to do, and how can you phrase what you want it to do based on what you've created? If you just give it a little task, such as there is one of the problems is called the stamp collector problem, right? Let's say you're a stamp collector and you have a general AI, and you give it the task of get me all of the stamps, put a priority on the rare stamps, and try to get them for me at the least expense, right? That's a reasonable thing to ask. That's something that you can ask me, right? So you ask that of your AI, and your AI first researches what the internet is and what cards are and what money is and what the economic system of the world is, and tries buying one stamp here and one stamp there, and then finds that it is much more efficient to hijack the world banking system and get control of all of the money, because then it can buy all of the stamps. And then it needs to get them delivered, so it decides to hijack the world transport network. But then it notices that there will be a limit to how many stamps it can get, because there aren't all that many stamps in the world. So the best way to get more stamps is to start producing stamps. So it uses the money that it has hijacked to buy paper factories and right, printing factories and stuff like that. Then it takes control of all of the paper in the world to produce more stamps, and then it notices that it's running out of wood as the primary resource for making paper. So it starts researching what the paper is made out of, finds that it's cellulose, which is basically a carbohydrate chain. So everything that has carbon and hydrogen in it is basically a source for making more stamps, and therefore it converts all of the humans and all of the life on the planet into stamps. Right?
Okay, so I was looking at, I typed in, what you were just saying, the stamp collector problem, and I didn't realize, like, damn, like Stanford did a study on it, like a bunch
Yes.
of big universities, and the way it's simplified to me, and then you simplified it as well at the end, is it's the whole iRobot idea of the three laws and how we interpret it versus how a robot would interpret it if it really thought it through.
Yes.
It's Skynet. The eventual solution to the problem is to destroy everything to generate whatever the solution is.
Yes. Right. And then you like the first idea that people come to is, well, just put a big red button on it and have somebody observe it. And when it starts doing something that's beyond what it should be doing, push the red button and make it stop, right?
But the problem would be, what if
Okay.
it thought about
and then you have the stop button problem.
it
right?
figures it out.
If its task, if its purpose in the world, if the thing by which it values its success is how many stamps it can produce, because that's its task, one of the first steps is to
keep them alive.
Yes, to keep him running, to remove every obstacle which would ever make him stop in producing. So the first goal before he delivers the first stamp will be to disable the red button.
Yeah, I was reading it was like it's a short story, but it was like, what if? It kind of on the same subject, but it was like a robot that made nuclear bombs, and the idea was that the robot knows how to do this, and then it would basically decide when and where it needed to be used. And it came to the conclusion that, or at the very end, it was basically what ends up happening is the robot makes a missile or makes this nuclear bomb and then blows up itself in the factory. Like, oh shit. It's crazy.
Self-preservation is a thing.
Well, if its job is to keep our self-preservation, then it killing itself could easily be its first step. If it was to protect us, I think it would go to more extreme solutions to where we would end up like batteries in the Matrix, because it would have more control.
Right. Then you have the concept of instrumental convergence, which is there are tasks that you will want to perform no matter what your ultimate goal is. One of those tasks is survival, right? If you have a task to maximize anything in the world in any way, like maximize how good the answer is, maximize how many stamps you can get, maximize the peace on Earth, whatever it is, whatever your task is, there is a convergence of the need for survival, right? You will not want to be interrupted in that task, because no matter how good you are at that task, if you can do it for longer, you will perform more.
Yeah.
Right? So whichever task you give to general AI, the first thing that it's going to do is make sure that it's indestructible.
So,
one way or the other.
So, in a sense, general AI is not going to happen.
General AI is Skynet.
General AI is Skynet. General AI will very likely happen.
Yeah, I was going to say it's actually probably closer than you think, but it's just putting the parts together.
But
I mean, one person is working on one thing and another person is working on another. You know,
but then don't you need that quote unquote fail safe algorithm?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So there's a lot of research going into general AI safety, literally into the process of how do we make a general AI which will serve the purposes that we want as we can envision them, which will not be able to, which will overcome all the problems that I've just listed and many, many more, right? We need to know those things before we start building the first one.
But then at that point, aren't we saying that we always want to be smarter than that AI, which then takes the whole reason for a general AI in the first place?
Well, not necessarily, because what does it mean to be smarter, right? If you can have most of the jobs that we do on Earth today, the employment in those jobs is either mechanical and repetitive and can be replaced with robots, or is creative thinking, which just requires brain capacity, right? So if you can replace your creative workers with a general AI, you get free labor. And if you need more, you just clone the one that you have, like copy paste it. Having a bunch of human level AI, which will not get smarter than human level, is really, really beneficial, as evidenced by we employ humans.
Right, and that would be the management of your whole system. It would be that general AI.
Yep.
Right?
But then wouldn't that come down
And-
to the ethics of it? Could that mean like that general AI could fire half your crew for no reason or for its own reason?
Well,
Yeah.
that's part of the issue that they're coming across. They have conferences on it,
But then
quite a bit.
Aren't we just talking about making a general AI into a specific AI?
Well,
Yes and
yes and no. Well, we are trying to see what the safest course of action is. There are currently no restrictions of what that course could be. It could be that the safest course is to build a god, right? It could be that the safest course is to build just another class of humans, which will be digital humans. It could be that we want subhumans, right? It depends on what the outcome of the current research is.
Could you see everything I'm thinking of in the problem a general AI would bring only brings me to making it a specific AI, or because it's almost like saying a general AI would be classified as like you're saying a digital human, but then it would have to have a conscious. It'd have to have laws that it govern. Would.
Maybe not, right? It's a different kind of intelligence.
Right.
We cannot know at this, like, we literally do not know enough about human consciousness to be able to say whether or not that thing would be conscious. And some of that would be literal ethical, philosophical questions of, are we prepared to consider that thing as conscious? More than is it conscious in itself?
But then it'd be
I mean, the law part is a whole. The law part is a whole different aspect. But I mean, if you think of it in the aspect of building something, and you say, "Hey, look, if you wanted to make legs for yourself, what would be the best way to do it?" And so the applications for that could be, amazing for us, for prosthetics and things like that. And it's how far can you take it, and how far would you let it go, I guess.
But again, the same question is, how do you put boundaries on a general AI?
Well, yes, that's the big question, and that's the research that's being done under the field of general AI security.
Damn, that's where I just realized if every country, like major military country, built a general AI, it could be just like a war that lasts 10 minutes and everyone's dead.
Well, you would wonder if they would start off and like just build themselves a bunker and just kill anything that came in, things like that, and they just sat there.
Well,
And
because they just to outlast the batteries of the other ones or something like that. Stockpile batteries.
like, if you really want to short circuit it, we can short circuit it to the beginning of this conversation and say that the military has the technology which is 10 or 15 years ahead of the civilians. And then you can get into some conspiracy theories very, very quickly about whether or not general AI already exists and is what is going on in the world of politics and hacking and election interference and Trump's presidency. Is all of that just the AI messing with the world to benefit the players, right?
That's the crazy part about it, because when, like I was saying earlier, the whole AI couldn't do the Canaan thing with Obama and all that. Like, with that technology, like the realization that we may have only seen Trump twice, like the real Trump on TV twice, and I was thinking, is that wrong of the government to do, or is it actually, really safe for the president of the free world? Is it dishonest? Like, I mean, it definitely brings cadence to the whole Osama bin Laden, is he alive or not, conspiracy. That makes that real, like a real conspiracy.
Oh, one of the problems in general AI security is conversational persuasion, right? Where if we talked about something, there is a certain combination of claims and evidence that I could present to you to convince you that what I'm saying is true, right? Mm-hmm. And us being approximately equal in intelligence, we're on the same scale at the very least.
Force or not a force?
Yes.
Okay, then we are. Continue.
No, the yes is to both of those questions.
Asshole.
Right? So if you face a thing which is significantly more intelligent than you, that figures out psychology completely, figures out human biases, human reasoning entirely, it could probably persuade you of whatever it wants within a few sentences, maybe even a few words. Literally, of anything. That up is down, that that the Russians are blue, that whatever you can imagine, it can just flat out convince you of it so that you're certain and consider it knowledge.
Can a specific AI do that?
No. Specific AI does a specific task.
I mean, but if you could, but you can. We'll put it like if you're talking to me about how gravity is a force, there are, like you said, there are certain things you could say. There are certain ways of saying things that could better convince somebody or not convince somebody. You can program a specific AI to complete that type of task, right? Or it wouldn't but
so a specific AI that could complete that task would be a general AI.
Why? If you
necessarily,
you can give the algorithm for any way.
Why you can't? Yeah, but you can't take psychology and break down psychology of a person. Every person is different, and I mean, you could classify certain people and then classify other people. So, and there's nuances of people. So that would be the thing. But you also have to take the information from the internet and how fast could that AI download that information and be able to make a decision within seconds.
So so essentially, you could ask an AI, or you'd be like, if you pricked yourself with a pen, how would it feel? It wouldn't be able to answer you.
Right.
Yeah.
But it could download information. and make a 50-50 decision, which is a better percentage of the amount of people that say it feels like this. And that's the information it could give you.
Does that mean there's like questions you can ask a robot and they're just, as far as we know, no way for it to answer it? Kind of like the pinprick one, basically.
Right.
And that again ties back to that is the Turing test, right? If you have an AI which is indistinguishable from a human in a conversation, that nobody can really say whether that's a human on the other side typing the answers or an AI generating answers, that passes the Turing test. Right. Now, that's somewhat incomplete because if you limit the topic of the conversation and if you allow for obfuscation and kind of misdirection, like literally what the flat earthers are doing in half of their conversations, you lose precision on the Turing test. So we already have specific AI which can pass the Turing test under those circumstances, right? So which can gish gallop and go off topic and right.
Yeah, what type of pen are you talking about? What's the size of it? Oh, did you see Pagan yesterday? It was beautiful. Yeah, okay, I see.
Yes. Precisely.
So what you're saying are flat earthers are general? No, they're not general AI because they would have figured that out by now.
Yeah. Flat earthers do not possess general intelligence.
Yeah. It's definitely. I guess you would consider that specific a specific AI because they're kind of programmed with what they say. Doesn't meander very. It hasn't in a while. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Get ready, boys. Aaron, how you doing, Aaron?
So would you consider?
What's up, guys?
Uh-oh. Whoa.
Aaron.
Hey,
Sober
Aaron.
Aaron, how you doing, buddy?
Good. How you doing?
How you doing, Aaron?
Like
Good. Good.
Wow, 0 beers. How you doing? Damn, feeling good. You see how I can
Absolutely.
tell,
How
Aaron?
you feeling?
That's how good of friends me and Aaron are now. That I can just tell instantly how many beers he's had. And this is sober Aaron. Welcome, sober Aaron.
Sean, I'm a 6-pack deep. Come on.
You're lying. I can hear you. I understood what you just said. You may have just bought a 6-pack, but you haven't opened it yet.
Good call. Good call.
Yeah.
What's up, Maxwell?
So Barney, would you consider those script writing bots? Would you consider those a specific AI or just a sub program?
They are specific AI.
What's the difference between
Well,
those?
there are both kinds, right? You have algorithmic script writing.
Oh, okay.
But
Can AIs write Can AIs write an algorithm?
do you know about the unicorn AI?
Excuse you?
That one I don't know.
Is that
Right.
which
That's
class is that?
a script writing AI, and that's a real specific AI, right? Which kind of remembers what it wrote down before and keeps track of it, and then several paragraphs later we'll talk about a different aspect of the same thing, and we'll pull information from the text that it has written and expand upon it. So they gave it a sentence which was something like unicorns are, and then let it just generate text after that. And it went on to this whole diatribe of unicorns are a type of animal which lives in South America, in Peru, and the researchers at the University of and found a city in Peru have found it, and like it it does predictive writing, but it also at the same time keeps track of what it has written before and incorporates it and includes information from the world about it.
Okay, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. And people like to take those, feed it thousands or hundreds of hours of things, and see what it writes. My favorite has got to be someone made a bot watch about 1,000 hours of Trump rallies, and it wrote essentially what I would consider a really convincing Trump skit, including a swamp being on fire in Mexico. I'll see if I can track that down and put it in the side chat for you.
What's the difference? Brian had said, I forget what it was. The difference between the specific AI and program something.
Well, we've covered it. Programs
Okay.
are algorithms, right?
Okay.
AI are kind of grown. AI are cultivated to perform a task. Programs are designed to perform a task.
I don't see any possible way of having a general AI at all. Like, it just doesn't seem good for the human race.
It's a whole.
Like, pretty much the only way I could think of solving all the world issues is kill every government official there is. I just don't see that happening.
Yes, and I'm very glad that you're not a god.
There you go.
Right?
I understand
But
that you
got
have
it
a
in the
very
side chat
big
for you.
you have a big responsibility there, Barney. I'm happy you're the one who took it.
A general AI. Oh, fuck you. A general AI is not constrained by your mental capacity.
What's the difference between a 2D AI, like on our phones or screens or our series, versus a 3D AI, Barney?
What do you mean 2D and 3D?
2D meaning
On a screen?
I have, yes, I have a form of AI on my phone that kind of reacts to what I've done in the past, and it takes.
Like Siri?
Sure, yep. You know, but what about a 3D AI, where when I order a package from Amazon and a robot delivers it, right?
It's the same confusion between what a robot is and what an AI is. Those things can be connected, but don't have to be.
Yeah, like
Okay,
a robot's going to go to your house, and that's it. Whereas an AI, I think, would go to your house, your job, maybe you're closest to kin.
A robot can be run by an AI. It can contain it, or it can be controlled by it off site. But the physicality of an AI is the irrelevant bit here.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest confusion. That the idea that AI does not have to be a robot.
It doesn't have to be physical at all. It can be all software.
I'm constantly thinking that it has to be, a robot.
Yeah, Sean, exactly. That's the go-to kind of perception of the public is.
Well, that's what we're given.
Because of movies and crap,
Yeah.
But AI in it, Barney or Sean or Yuka, it's a logic board, isn't it?
Yeah, basically it's just a computer. I mean, it could be a program that's written and just running through. I mean, truthfully, there could be an AI on the just running through through the internet because it's evading every trap. That's the only thing it's doing it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be the thing.
That's not.
By the way, do you know what the word robot means?
Nope.
Mechanical, right?
No, it's Czech for slave.
Huh?
The word robot comes from the Czech language. There was a Czech science fiction writer in the early 19th century, or in the early 20th century, which wrote a novella which was called Russell. Let me just check the right name. Rossum's Universal Robots, where the word robot in Czech literally means a slave, where he made mechanical slaves that would look like humans and perform the same tasks as humans, but they would just be machines. And that's the first idea, 1920. Right?
Yeah, and they would just repeat, basically. Repeat. Right.
What's my phone? Hang on. Someone reminded me in the chat. I do have. Toady, or who asked me that? I'm gonna mess up the name. Hang on. So Fred Knotts. Yes, they're not conspiracies. There was just two things that were said to me over the past couple days that just blew my mind that people actually think this way, and I'll talk about them in a second. But they're going to, it's going to really make you worry about the human brain.
Which human brain? My human brain, your human brain, or the brain of the person which told you those facts?
Yes. Yes. Give me about 3 minutes to be able to do that.
That's always my favorite. My favorite. To questions with binary answers, that's my favorite answer. Yes.
What's up, Travis?
Yeah.
Hey, Barney, it's Aaron. Would you ever...
Hello.
What's up, Travis? What's up?
F that A. I want to hear
Barney.
the horn. Stop. Where's the horn?
Honk.
I'm going through a residential street right now.
So he can't scare children.
Well, I noticed that he has this thing he does when he gets on, and it's cool. But I didn't hear the honk.
Yeah, I
was like,
totally would have done it if I would have been on the highway, but I got houses to the left of me and houses to the right, so.
Fuck them if they can't take a joke.
Yeah, I know, right?
And a name on the door. Right?
Is it illegal to do that?
Well, a lot of times in these spots, they tell you that you can't run your engine brake.
Oh, the J brake.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I get that.
So the horn's a bit louder than the Jake brake. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, I always figured the Jake brake. They say that because the Jake brake would scare the living crap out of someone who's never heard it before. You know,
yeah,
on the road,
yeah,
it'd be bad.
Yeah.
Especially a rowdy one. It's like,
whoa! If someone knows what a Jake brake is, it's kind of.
All right, I can do it now.
There we go.
Oh shit! What's up, Travis? we didn't
Hey,
know
Travis,
if
it
it was
is
you. Or not.
you. I thought you were AI.
Yeah, AIs don't have horns.
If it was a general AI, I'd know to go ahead and make the horn sound.
I think Barney's an AI. He's up all the time, like 24/7.
Yeah, but he's not even on our same time zone.
No, but it just seems like he's always up. So it seems abnormal.
It seems like you're always up. It
Oh,
seems like we're all always up.
yeah, that might be true.
Barney has the power of nicotine to keep him awake. Barney has a superpower. It's called nicotine. It'll keep you awake through damn near anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet. I have a question for Barney. We'll derail this conversation. Barney, I just saw a YouTube or even a mainstream news article of folks getting MC microchipped for certain purposes. We've got them in our wallets right now. You know, we've got them in our animals right now.
Your phone.
Barney, would you ever take your child or children to a facility and have somebody put in a chip that you didn't know what it was doing? Right?
Why would you go if you didn't know what it was doing?
Yeah, it's a very loaded question. The answer is yes, under very specific specific conditions. In the same way that, yes, I would also take my children to get stabbed with a knife by a person whom I don't know, and I don't know what they're going to do under very specific conditions, right? I'd take them to a surgeon to perform an operation on them.
What would the conditions, your conditions, be for the chip thing? You said it'd be very specific conditions that you would do that.
Okay. Under specific, sorry, specific is maybe a wrong word there. I would do it if I believe that there's a benefit for them in it. In the same sense, what?
What would cause this belief? You said if you believe there's a benefit. Like what would help us or you to create a belief that there was a benefit? And listen, I'm not against it. It was just something I saw. It's like, man, this is getting weird.
They do have places you can go to get your children chipped for, say, like location, like abductors, all that stuff like that. They do. You can have your child chipped. That's not far-fetched. That's or a conspiracy. It's just
no.
There.
Yeah, exactly, Sean. I know that you can, but I'm just asking Barney if he would, knowing as much as he knows and has taught us and has talked to us about.
The reason why I would accept being microchipped is mostly identification purposes. Like, instead of carrying an ID and a credit card and the documents that I have on me that can be lost and taken by somebody else, and that identify me as me legally in my country, I would much rather have a microchip under my skin which cannot be easily removed.
Could that identity then be erased? Yeah, could it be erased though? I mean, way easier than losing your license or losing your ID.
I don't know.
ID be erased?
I don't know. Can my ID be erased? Well, no.
The chip. I mean, yeah, the chip one.
That's what think of it for you.
Yes.
Think of it this way. It's a storage device. I mean, for information, could it be a breakthrough technology for Alzheimer's or something like that?
Well, let's not go there.
Neural implants are not what we're talking about here right now.
I want to go back to Barney's about the ID. Sorry, Barney, to cut you off. Sorry. If you have a reason or in a legitimate reason for ID purposes, right? Let's say for any bad things that may happen to your child, let's say. What if your whole child's record and history was attached to that chip, but then when somebody decides to get funny, everything's erased, and those without information may not be able to survive.
Wait, Aaron, how do you think it is now? That's how it is now.
Well, right now everything's on paper. I can still prove
No. If you lose your social security card and your IDs, you then call the Social Security office, who has your file on record, who will send you a card so you can show, you have you can verify your Social Security.
Everything's on paper.
For you, but that's the smart way, because if you lose it, you can replace it.
Still on record, yeah.
Yeah, it's still there.
So,
but a chip is not.
One part of it is.
The chip isn't going to contain everything only in the chip. That would be ludicrous.
Yeah, the chip's going to be a copy of what they have now.
The chip is going to contain a unique identifier number. The same, like we have those that are used for pets, right?
Yep.
All that chip contains is a number.
But you didn't create it, Barney. I trust where you're coming from. Like, if you created it, I would trust you. Because I've talked to you, I know you. But these chips...
I also didn't create my...
You've never talked to, and you have no idea their motivation.
Well, no idea. You can try to figure out the evil ways of using these chips. But the realization is that, I mean, there's 1,000 possibilities for everything. But it has to happen or have an evidence for it happening.
When I go to the store and buy food, or when I go to the pharmacy and buy medication, I didn't create that food and I didn't create that medication, and I wasn't personally overseeing the process of cultivating the resources for that food, and right?
Exactly.
Yes. Does that mean that I will never ever eat anymore?
Does it mean that you're as fit as you should be right now because you ate healthy food that was deemed and put on the label as healthy?
What's your point?
This question.
Meaning, Barney, that we, yes, I do the same thing as you. I go to a store, I don't have a garden, I buy these foods that says healthy choice, number one, 100% protein, all this stuff. Yeah, and millions of folks do the same as we do, yet millions of folks, hundreds of thousands, let's say, are dying of cancer and certain diseases.
Yes.
And it's just an anomaly. If we're fed, if we go to the store and we trust the store to say, yes, the government, the FDA is going to control what food we're given, and it should be healthy and it should be to a certain standard that is clean and pure and disease-free, then why is this country have the largest Medicare base, hospital base, people dying from simply living, right? From simply existing, they're dying.
Yes. Life is a lethal disease, which is 100% lethal. People die. That's not what I'm worried about. I will die. I will eventually die. And what?
But people at 50 years old. I mean, it's hard to explain, Barney, because I'm not in that field, so I can't give you exact stats of hospitals in this country are filled to the brim.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
why
in
is that?
every part of the world.
When we go to the store, me and you go to the store because we trust what we buy is good and healthy and all this stuff. I mean, are all these people?
It was never different.
Doing bad
things? Darren, you realize the number one cause of cancer is age, right?
Is it?
Nobody knows the cause of cancer.
We know many causes of cancer.
Yeah.
We know
the cause. If you know the cause, why can't you find the cure?
Isn't that a tautology?
Don't smoke cigarettes. You won't get well, I don't want to say you won't, but
no, you will decrease your chance. Right? We know the mechanism. We know the mechanisms by which cancer is formed. Right? It is genetic mutation within the cells, which prevents the cell to be destructed by the organism when it goes astray. You have so far had tens of thousands of cancers in your body, which your body has naturally produced.
Have they found well, that's a big that'd be cancer that doesn't spread, right?
What? No. It is simply your body contains the cure for cancer. Though there is parts of your genetic code which are specific for if this cell becomes cancerous, tell it to destroy itself and it will destroy itself. And if it doesn't destroy itself, send the immune system to destroy it and it will destroy it, right?
Okay.
Barney, have you ever looked up cases of cancer in other countries? How come this country?
I am in another country.
Yeah, and relative-wise, population-wise, per patient-wise, per population, why is Croatia so much lower than the United States?
Population would be a huge one.
Yeah. There's a lot of factors.
No. So yes, quality of life, quality of air, quality of water, quality of food. One of the things which is, in my opinion, costing Americans a lot is the free market running completely unchecked and the fear of paying taxes, the abhorrence of regulation, stuff like that. Where
You mean
yes,
freedom?
you might have the FDA, but that FDA is powerless and isn't funded. You don't have any real checks, and whenever checks are performed, it is found that your produce is way below acceptable levels. But whenever you vote for the people who will tax you least and regulate the market least. And
To perpetuate that
oh,
system. Exactly, Barney. Wow, we're on the same page.
Yeah,
Damn
yeah.
it.
right.
I mean, really,
You,
you know,
and you call that freedom. I'm sorry, 50% of my income goes into taxes, health insurance, pension fund, and surcharges. And all of those are mandatory. Those things, like, I never see them in my paycheck. They just, that money is gone before the paycheck arrives. I don't pay my taxes. My taxes
but
are paid before I can be paid, right?
yes, sir.
50%.
I don't
The
call
sum
that
total
freedom
is
at all.
50%. That money pays for the fact that we have a much lower rate of cancer,
Yeah, I think
amongst,
Maybe.
amongst other things.
there's two things.
Hey,
So,
Barney, real
hang on
quick,
there,
I
hang on
just
there,
want
hang on
to,
there, hang on there,
I just want to
hang on there,
clarify.
hang on,
I
hang
do
on.
not call the United States system that you just described or the Croatia system you described freedom. Not at all. But we can carry on because
Well,
it doesn't matter. We
there's
keep
no
saying
There is
freedom.
no such thing
sorry,
as
John.
absolute freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck, I forgot what I was gonna say. Damn it, Aaron. Go ahead.
I'm done.
Oh, okay. Okay, fine. Well, are you guys ready to hear the two of the craziest fucking beliefs or thoughts in that you'll ever hear? This is amazing. You ready? Okay,
Sure.
so these two thoughts were brought to you by one person. I'm not gonna tell you who or what relation they are to me, because then it would affect me and your opinions. But it wasn't me. Just to clarify that. The first one will be. Oh, you're gonna love this. And by no means is this serious, yet the person was. So we all put ice in our sodas, right? How many people are under the assumption?
Unless you're Canadian.
Yeah, it's a bigger issue already. How many people are under the assumption that your ice tastes like your soda? Essentially thinking that your ice has absorbed the soda you taste. Which,
No.
for most of you, isn't possible. Just so you
No.
guys understand, doesn't work that way. Ice does not absorb soda,
Yes.
right? So,
Okay.
yeah, right. That's a pretty basic. That's a well, I guess you were wrong, or then you fix it. But it actually brought me to a better idea of flavor, or soda ice. It seems genius to me. It melts. Your soda doesn't get watered down.
Wait. You have literally invented popsicles?
You don't put popsicles in your soda, Barney.
You have literally
You know?
invented putting popsicles in your soda?
Yes.
Barney. He invented soda popsicles. Come on.
Well, let's get this straight. First of all, how
What
come
does
no one,
the-
how
what-
come
wait,
no one
wait,
does
wait,
it?
wait,
Because
wait,
again,
wait.
your soda
What
would
does
not
the
be
word
watered
pop
down.
mean?
I want some carbonation in my popsicle. Let's do this.
What does the word pop mean in the word popsicle?
You pop it in your mouth. I don't know.
No, pop is a name for juice, for a soda.
Oh, you
For
said Jews. I was like, excuse me. I was like, that's
Jews.
political with it, huh?
Right. A
Speaking
sugared
of Jews, how did
beverage
Tottenham do?
is called a pop.
yeah, that's the old soda shops and things like that. That's where that term comes from.
Right? And an icicle is
Yeah.
made out of ice, and a popsicle is made out of frozen pop.
Pop.
But you
Right?
don't put
Yeah.
popsicles in your soda.
So you invented putting popsicles in your soda.
Square popsicles in my soda. And Barney, I don't have to invent it. I just have to make it better. That's it.
Yeah, you had to get it in the bottle, like the bottle, and have it in there, and you like shake it, and it comes out that temperature
No,
enough to make that
guys,
popsicle in it.
guys, no, it's ice
Travis came on and
made from soda,
was
in
trying
which
to
you
say something, but
dispense.
I cut him off.
I know,
I cut him
which
off.
then you dispense into your soda. So when it does melt, it's not watered down. Why hasn't anyone figured this out?
Flat Earth.
It would still deter decarbonation, though.
Yeah,
Gravity.
but it wouldn't happen as fast.
Moonquakes.
Are you seriously just babbling right now?
Okay.
I bet
that's
Aaron,
fact number
I bet
one.
Aaron thinks like thinks like the things I'm about to say on a regular basis. Okay, continue. No, okay. Let me clarify something. I didn't invent anything. I didn't make anything better. Like this just came off the thought of that ice, watered ice, absorbs your soda. Therefore, when you finish your soda and you eat your ice, it still tastes like your soda. This person really thought that their ice was capable of absorbing the soda syrup that tastes like soda,
Sean,
rather than
what are
it
you
being
watching?
on it.
What are you watching? Are you watching Flat Earth Channel?
This person sounds kind of like, I'm not asking for myself, I'm asking for a relative, right?
No, wait, it's not me, you asshole. I'm serious. Hey, if you keep messing with me, I'll dox this person, and I'll make this person say something in the chat so you know it's not me.
Okay, what's the other idea?
Oh, okay. This
Air is not the atmosphere.
Okay, anyway, well, this is far worse. Okay, this isn't even an idea. This is what the person thought. So you guys know what a rattlesnake is, right?
Yep.
A rattlesnake? Yes.
Yep.
So we were driving and we see a rattlesnake, and this person asked me if it's alive. I say I don't think so because it was in the middle of the road, and I could tell that its tail, its rattle, had been ran over. And then the person says, "Does that mean the rattlesnake is no longer poisonous?" I looked at him and said, "Excuse me?" And the person said, "Isn't the poison in their rattle?" And I went, "Wow.
Wow.
All people don't think like this." Now, I'm telling you right now, the person is listening, and this person is probably going to call me very upset I talked about this. But, yeah, that's
Sean,
someone who has...
I didn't know your girlfriend
That's
watched
someone... I'm going to kick your ass, Brian.
Sean, I would also like to say that this person also believes the Earth is round. Right?
No, this person doesn't care. This person doesn't even, care to think about it. I try to talk to them, and they're just like, oh, who cares?
I'm just giving you shit. Come on.
But I will say that as now that I've already been doxxed by Brian, yes, I do consider her a flat earther when she says stupid shit like that.
Oh,
I say that you're lucky. I say that you're lucky. I'm able to handle you. I talk to flat earthers all day.
Okay, here we go.
You're not even a flat earther, Aaron. Shut up.
What?
He's like the worst apologetic ever. Apologist. I'm sorry, Barney. You cleared me on that one before. I want to get in trouble.
Well, I mean, you either called him the worst defense or the worst defender. I mean, it's a pretty fair toss there.
Exactly. Now,
You know what I would call the rattle on the end of a snake there?
a rattler.
Well, you can't tell if it's dead or alive. You just really can't tell what it's doing. I'd call it the ether rattle.
Oh.
I'd call it a stealth rattlesnake.
Yeah. And I just want to say this for people that may think
That
this
was
way.
that was so bad.
Yeah, that was terrible. I
That
agree.
was awesome. Come on, I want Travis to have an intro. Come on.
No, you at least that was bad. That was. You better stop him,
That was
Travis,
awesome.
because he's gonna ruin your ether band. I mean, not that
I know,
you.
right?
No, wait, not that you already haven't. But he's really gonna kill it.
Like when I was 12, 8 Snake would have been a really good name for Xbox Live.
Well, just so you guys know, for people who don't know, because I want to say this, because I now realize people think like this. The pits in a snake's, we'll call it its cheeks, is where the poison is, which is also why poisonous snakes have those little weird shaped heads, whereas they're not streamlined, and they usually only have fangs, not typically a full mouth of teeth. Or shouldn't even say it that way, but yeah. And for the record,
Thanks.
boa constrictors have
Thanks, Bob, the
teeth.
science guy. Thanks, Bob. Thanks. You just totally
Aaron,
broke down reptilianism.
They
Yeah,
have fangs.
Aaron, I'm kind of worried about you. I just don't want you to lay down on the ground and talk to a snake. I feel I can see you doing that after a long day of work and a 12-pack.
You know what's funny about that? You know what's funny about that ether rattle, though?
Oh, Jesus
is that
Christ.
snake will still turn around and bite you. They will. Okay?
Yeah, they'll bite you after you cut the head off.
You might not be able to handle it. Go, Travis, go.
Yeah, but
Little fella.
if the considering how much
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that Barney didn't correct you on.
Barney didn't correct him on what?
On venomous rather than poisonous. I'm surprised. Usually Barney's on top of it like that.
Yeah, God, you know what? Shut up, Brian. You're almost at the same point Barney is with me with that whole fucking force shit, and he has to be the other person. You know what? Poisonous, venomous does not matter. You're gonna die sometimes.
Poison is man-made, correct, Barney?
No.
And venom is...
No.
No.
One is a
No,
respiratory system,
hey,
and the
Barney.
other one's your nerve system.
Sean, you don't sound like
Respiratory.
Barney.
I'm right,
You
though,
don't sound like-
asshole.
No.
Yes, I am. Now correct me.
Let's let some folks smarter than us answer my dumb question.
Yeah, that's why we always ask Barney, our god. Go ahead, Barney.
What?
He asked you a question. Now we want answers.
Poison, I would say, I'm going to make the claim, poison is man-made.
Poison
Venom.
oak. Yep,
is-
debunked.
God
Debunked
damn it.
that
Fuck
quick.
you, Sean. Fuck
It
you.
didn't even
Fuck.
take a Barney.
Alright.
Wah, wah. Try again.
You win.
No, but what is the
You
difference?
win.
So I don't have to Google it.
There's a couple
Poison is a
differences
toxin that
usually.
gets into the body via swallowing, inhaling, or absorption through the skin. Venom is
Yep.
injected.
And venom is typically direct inject.
Yeah, your
Excellent.
question really sucked, Aaron. I'm going to add that one to the dumb list. And yes, I am making a list.
What are we up to now?
3.
Does that mean that if you take poison and put it into a syringe, it becomes venom?
Ooh,
33.
absolutely.
That's a good question.
Wow. That was a really good question. Please, anyone listening with a brain cell count of 4, do not try this at home. I really think I need to give those type of disclaimers
Let's see.
now.
Try it out and then let us know. Were you killed by a poison or a venom? Thank you.
If you believe you can fly, you should be able to do it from the ground. Stuff like that.
Yeah, you don't need to jump off a building.
Yeah, no, you don't. Wow, I just thought of that's a great 1-minute upload. Fucking public service announcements to the stupid.
Yeah.
You know what?
Glover's alert.
You actually can't do. You can't distinguish it by proteins either, because now that I think about it, pertussis toxin is not a venom; it's a protein. Ricин's a protein. Is botulinum toxin a protein? I think it is. So yeah, poison and venom can't be distinguished due to their composition either.
So I was right. Take my name off that list, Sean.
Not gonna happen.
Fred Knott says
That was
venom is
not
from animals, poison is from plants. That's not true because there are poisonous animals. Animals which, if you eat them, you will get poisoned, but they don't bite or sting or
Let's look it up.
Just the secretions on a poison dart frog are enough.
There you go. Poison dart.
Or
frog.
even spores.
That it's in the name, people. Fuck.
Yeah.
Can we just call them all toxins?
We should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oxycam. There we go.
Thanks, Barney. I was getting stressed out for a minute.
How come you can be poisoned but not venomed by a human, like by somebody? You know what I mean? Like someone can poison you, but they can't venom you. I wonder if venom has something to do with like your body, the body being able to create it.
I think Barney's right. When his first statement a while back was about injection from natural sources. Doesn't that make sense? More like a venomous thing will inject it, but a poisonous thing, you can rub a dart, on a poisonous frog.
Oh, remember, I hate to cut
Like
Aaron off, but not really. Remember how my problem was I never paid attention to the chat? OBS has figured it out. This is so awesome. Check this out. They made it so you could actually have like a custom browser and have the chat on my OBS. That is so awesome. Thank you, OBS. You guys are geniuses.
You should donate.
Thank you for all your free software, OBS.
Hey, I don't care what you say. I've used paid for broadcast program software like OBS. It's still better than all of those. Like,
I agree. That's what I'm saying.
The only one I can say that would match would be, I think it's called vMix, but you literally need to have external not software devices and stuff. That's
hardware.
Yeah, that's where that shit. No, like devices in hardware. But that's like the only one I've seen that is better. But you need to be like trained, like go to school, get your degree in broadcasting and all that shit to understand how those things work. For like how to use it. Like for instance, I stopped using my OBS I didn't stop, but there's other ways to use OBS. When you watch the news, when you guys like watch all those things, like that's what they're using. They're basically using a OBS. That's how set up these streams can be. It's just about a matter of how much time you're willing to put into it or can put into it.
Sean, is OBS a paid service or?
No, it's open source. Every bit of it. There's not one part that you pay for.
All right, that's fucking cool.
Is it community built, or is there a company still behind it building software?
No. It's how do you answer that? I think OBS was built by a company that became open source because I would say 99% of the scripts that OBS uses is open source from users. You can build a source for it and upload it or whatever you would call it to OBS forum, and your script will be up there. Or what's the other one? GitHub is another. GitHub is huge. GitHub is like the main place where people make scripts for everything.
Right. Now GitHub, they have an enterprise version that you can pay for to have advanced features, but
yeah, but that's way beyond anything I could ever do.
Right.
Or shit, we should be asking Barney. Or shit, Sean sounds like he knows a lot about it too. I mean, I get how OBS is open source and everything, but to have a developer's knowledge when you're on a computer or on an OBS, I mean, the options are so endless, it's ridiculous. Like everything I use is very basic for OBS. I stopped using the really technical shit because that's when I started like erasing shit and think weird things were going on when I tried to start writing scripts for my OBS. So I still have to keep learning on how to even attempt to do that.
What's the topic?
Shit, anything you like, sir.
Whatever.
Well, let me tell you about my my sub.
Go ahead.
Because I've only done it 5 times, and so I was like, I have been subbed, several times by high-level white belt and a blue belt or two. Actually, the guy with a purple belt.
There's no such thing as a high-level white belt. Please don't.
Well, basically, someone who's on the verge.
A white belt with a bunch of stripes on their belt.
Yeah.
Someone who's on the verge of getting a blue belt.
Yeah. What we call those stripes on the belt are confidence builders. They don't mean shit.
I get that, but it's still fun.
I don't know about that, right? Because
No,
like
'cause
the
here's
higher
the
level
thing.
belts do it. The
Okay,
higher
here's the
level
thing.
belts do it.
Yeah, that's the same. It's the exact same thing. It is. The only time it matters is on a black belt. That's the only time it matters.
But why?
Because it shows how many. So every stripe on a black belt is like that black belt getting another black belt. It's different. It's not the same.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what it is. When you have,
Yeah.
I would even say
It's like-
this. I would say your white and your blue belt are pointless already in themselves. You're still learning. You're still trying to get your body to subconsciously do these things. That's the difference.
Right.
A black belt does not think about what he's doing. His body does.
Sure.
They invent. Once they start getting the second stripes in black belts, they start creating ways, like moves. Put it this way. You know, you've learned by now there's an offense and a defense, and it goes back and forth no matter what you're doing.
Right.
A black belt.
Yeah, and
then
a black belt
create a
is.
list.
But yeah, he'll create a list and he'll go through it in a split second and start off with one. And then if that doesn't work, he will move on to something else.
Chris, have you done from in you're on your back, someone's in your guard. Have you done the armbar, triangle, Kimura combo?
No. Oh
Yeah.
God, no.
No. It's actually simple. This is because you go for a armbar, but he stops you. He stops your hips. You're then in a position to go for a triangle. When he shrugs out of that, his arm usually will post. You then go for a Kimura. Those are combinations. Those are things. That's exactly what I'm talking about. A white belt is.
I'd have to see it.
Well, yeah. Okay, ask your guy who trains you. He'll show you in a heartbeat. That's how you got to realize it. A white belt does move by move. One move does another move, does another move. All one move. One. You always would say one, or step one, with a white belt. A blue belt can get to maybe step 3 subconsciously, very smooth. That means go for the armbar, go for the triangle, go for the Kimura, all in a fluid steps based on what the natural defense is for each one of those. Well, you go to a brown or you go to a purple belt. A purple belt now subconsciously can do his moves, but he still gets subbed by brown belts all the fucking time, maybe even blue belts. Get you a brown belt, you are now supposed to have a very long list. That means you could probably go 3 to 4 minutes without thinking, in a sense. You get to a black belt, you're now creating things that will happen. I make you do something. Like, for instance, right now, Chris, if we rolled, I can make you get subbed out with an armbar. I can make you get choked out. I can make you get a Kimura based on I know what you'll do because depending on what I do. If I decide I want to
If I make this feint, you'll respond this way, and that opens you up to this.
Exactly. Like if I'm going for like what I like to do is I like to go for sweeps because sweeps aren't very. They're not 100%. I would put them in a 40% gonna work. But what happens is when you go for a sweep, a person then stops it. He goes into a defense mode, and the only way you stop anything in jiu-jitsu is with your arms or your legs, which means something is going to be extended. Therefore, I'll have an opening. So I use those for openings rather than to actually sweep somebody. You'll start realizing those things happening. That's what a coach is looking for. He's looking for you to start combining your moves and your defense and your offense to progress where you are. Like the whole rumor, like people used to think if you're on your back, you're losing. No, if I'm when I was cage fighting, if I'm in a fight, I want to be, and we're on the ground, I want to be on my back. I would prefer to be on my back than even mounting somebody, just because I feel more comfortable there.
I kind of
you're not a top.
I didn't hear that.
You're not a top.
No, Barney, I'm a bottom. Come on over.
So
you like to be on your back.
Oh, but do not bring your bow and arrow.
So Sean, I kind of feel the same way, at least early on. Maybe it'll change, but like the way I got the guy is first of all, the guy's a white belt. He's not very good either, right? But he's been doing it for like.
Say this up again. Which one was it?
I got him in triangle.
Triangle choke with
So,
legs, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so he's been going to about 8 months, so not a lot of time, but I've only been going for a month, right? Like a month and a half maybe. And so basically, yeah, we start out on the ground. Like I don't like standing up because then you can get injured if you get slammed or whatever.
If when you train with your team, you start on your knees. When you train against another school or in a competition, that's when shit gets real.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, some of the guys in the gym do stand up, but I just choose not to. It's optional.
It's very dangerous. It's
right.
You're really asking for it. I've gotten at
Right.
least 5 stingers.
Guys,
doing it.
I just cannot tell you how gay this conversation is.
Wait,
Barney.
Yeah, I totally agree. My favorite position is the Glock. This is the position of the Glock.
Anytime
I'll put you in the Glock.
I like to be on bottom. We start on our knees.
Yeah.
Somebody
Barney,
starts on the floor.
when I see somebody with a sweater on, I get a stiffy.
Hey, Chris Berry, when you go to the ground, was there Coriolis? Did you feel it?
I spun him around, so there was, yeah. So anyways,
Okay,
let me just get through the story. It'll be short, but
and the worst part is as gay as you think it is, Barney, I will take your back at will.
I have a question for Barney. An actual question that's related to, but I do like Sean and Chris's go round. Go for it, Chris. Go.
So yeah, I mean, I know it's boring to a lot of people, but basically, so we were on the ground, and I was pulling him into my guard, Sean, like kind of like you're saying, you're more comfortable. I like going to my guard and trying stuff. So I pulled him into my guard, and like when you're new, I couldn't even tell you what I did to do this, but as I pulled him into my guard, I had my left leg around his hip as normal, but instead of my right leg going around his other hip, I flung it up, and I just caught him. I caught it around his neck. I pulled his right arm into me, and I got him in the triangle. And I knew instantly, like, I'm going to get him, or we're going to go to time, because we only do 2-minute rounds. And he was struggling so hard, and he kind of rolled over. So I fell on my side, and he was on his side. So then I started squeezing his head with my knees, and I'm like, well, this isn't really doing much. So then I pulled him.
That's why when you do that submission, you should be using very little energy. That's the white belt struggle. Everything you do, think of strength. Yeah. Strength is a very small factor. I mean, when I was competing all the time in jiu-jitsu tournaments, I was walking around 160 and cutting to 35s and 45s. But I actually would enjoy rolling with someone that's 200 plus, because all they want to do is strength, and it's very.
Barney, go on mute until we're
done. Barney, every time you laugh, I'm gonna let you know. Yeah. Every time you laugh, I want you to remember, I could take your back anytime I want.
You would be dead at 90 feet.
What? So I can't ever meet you. Got it. First of all, you're not going to know I'm angry at 90 feet.
I have a question for Barney.
Yeah?
Hey, Barney.
Hey, Aaron.
How are you doing? Okay. So,
how am I doing? Not very well, but I'm struggling through it and keeping up the appearances.
Time will tell. So, did you ever get anybody in a triangle or an arm lock or a leg lock?
No, I do archery.
Okay, good. Did you get anybody in a mind lock?
Yeah, flat earthers all the time.
There we go. Hey, Barney, I have a mind lock for you.
Oh, I can hear this one.
Yes. I'm gonna wrap my geometric arms right around his mind.
Okay, now that sounds gay.
Okay, this is weird.
That was super gay. Yeah,
sorry, Sean. I've had 3 of the 6-pack. I'm sorry.
Yeah, see.
Barney, the water bottle that I have sitting on my desk. Right
Aaron
there,
will say your name numerous times
at
beer.
And 3. The water bottle that Barney has sitting on his desk right there, is that accelerating?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if I lift that up to 50,000 feet and I drop it, is it also accelerating?
No. Well, it will once the resistance of air kicks in. But if you dropped it in a vacuum tube, it wouldn't. It would stop accelerating.
Barney, it sounds like I'm choking you. Speak up. Come on.
Oh shit.
Don't choke me. I'm not into that. Come on.
Jesus Christ.
So when it's on your desk, it is accelerating upwards.
Yeah.
And when it's in free fall, it is not accelerating, except it is being slightly accelerated by the resistance of the air.
Okay, so when it's on my desk, it's accelerating upwards.
Yes.
Gee whiz, Barney, stop choking me. 180 degrees from me on the sphere down in Australia, there's a water bottle. Which way is that accelerating?
Up.
Upwards? Upwards?
Yes. Yes.
How is this possible?
It is due to the curvature of space-time.
Wait,
If it's
I'm
accelerating
confused.
upward, go ahead, Chris.
What's accelerating up?
Everything that's standing on the surface of the Earth.
So now we have things that's accelerating up versus I thought gravity accelerated things down.
No.
It depends on how you're measuring it.
It depends.
Yes, it depends on your frame of reference.
I can't believe you guys believe this shit.
No, it's almost like saying acceleration is actually the normal force.
I asked this the other day in Jose's channel. I asked this question, and it was just incredulous.
And Travis, you got shut down, so here's your platform. Go.
It wholly depends on how you're asking the question, how the person is answering it. In 4D space-time, what Barney's saying is perfect.
Yeah, if you're on Earth, it is down. It is the center of mass. But if your reference is not Earth, then what is your down? That's why it's not the same.
Yeah, my
Okay.
no. My question yesterday was if a person in North America and a person in Australia drop an object at the same time, how does the Earth accelerate toward that object in both directions?
Without getting larger? Yeah, I know it's a mind fuck.
No, it's not a mind fuck. It's stupid. It's absolutely stupid.
Let's get
it's
one
not
thing
a mind
straight.
fuck.
That you're not going to see it. You're going to see the
it's stupid.
No, you are. You guys, this is absolutely. We might as well be talking how Santa Claus gets down the fucking chimney.
He doesn't go through the chimney, Aaron. He goes through the fucking door.
Haven't you seen the Santa Claus? We already know that one.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Go, Travis, go.
How about this?
Wait, hold on, Travis, hold on. I want to hear
hang
the
on.
official.
I hate to tell you
I
something.
want to hear the response.
Yeah, I hate to tell you something, Travis, but
Who the hell is veteran Aberley?
Santa is not real.
It's me. Did I cut you on?
Neither is gravity.
Yeah,
neither is
I'm
4D space. Neither
that's
is
my proper
space-time.
name.
Or eight.
Oh,
what about the ether band?
Okay, look, you know, it's this is like an amazing comeback. The ether band is what you see in front of you, Sean. There's no question.
No, but can you
no
explain
question
that
as to.
No, Travis, you got to
Everything
pinpoint
is
it on the
everything's
up
real.
down of gravity. Keep on there. Don't go to the ether band. Not yet.
Yeah.
You got to
Damn,
fucking point
everything
it right
I think
now.
fake.
Did I just flat earth that conversation? My bad. Holy crap. I just realized I did too.
Travis,
terrible.
how come when they
No,
drop a
you-
tennis ball in
you didn't-
Australia and I drop one here in America, the Earth rises up to them both? Why is that?
The Earth doesn't rise. There is no increase
Barney.
in volume.
But you just said
Well, then what's accelerating upwards?
Well, it's not that you are only attracted to that mass. M1 and M2 are attracted to each other in some aspect. That is why.
But Sean, we're way past Newtonian. This isn't Newtonian at all. Newtonian has nothing to
it
do with
isn't.
reference
I didn't say it was.
This is
I'm talking,
Einstein.
again, I said, but Barney, was I correct in my
So
first
forget
explanation?
math.
Hang on, Chris, because I explained that. Here on Earth, we do think of Newtonian. And Sean, I'm going to mute you because you're hot micing the shit out of your painting.
Oh shit! Sorry, man.
But I do appreciate when you do that. It is pretty badass. And actually, I want to talk to you. I'll message you in Discord. But I was correct in my explanation of down here on Earth. It is down to the center of the mass, but the whole if you're in space without Earth being your reference.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's not right though, Sean. No,
Barney?
no. Because yeah, go ahead, Barney.
No, that's not right because your measurements are off there.
What do you mean?
Hey guys, let's go back to Aaron. This is Aaron. His original
Yeah,
question
we
to
know.
Barney. I have a water bottle
Sorry,
on my table. Is it accelerating? Barney said yes. I said
Yes.
which way? He said up.
Up. Yes.
So what is accelerating up? The water bottle?
The confusion that's coming about is thinking in 3D space. Literally thinking in square corners and straight
That's
lines,
not
and then
confusion, Barney.
That's reality.
Real. That's reality, Barney. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't know your way of measuring things is reality. That's rubbish.
No, it's not rubbish. It's common sense. It's logical. It's empirical. 4D space and space
that's intuition then.
is not. Huh?
Okay, but hold on. All right, fine. But I just want to hear him play it out though, because I don't understand it. So I want to hear the explanation.
Barney, let me make this clear. My water bottle doesn't have a stopwatch in it, just so you know. Okay, go.
Yeah, that's fine.
So in Travis's example and Aaron's example now, what's going on is so the Earth isn't accelerating because it can't in that scenario. So the water bottles have to be accelerating down. But that's only Newtonian. That doesn't account for Einsteinian.
Yeah, if you measure it as a Cartesian system from your position, you being stationary, you being the origin of measurement, right? Or the ground being the origin of measurement, then you can measure those positions, those numbers change, right? As the thing gets closer to Earth, and you will then can calculate the speed and can calculate the acceleration from that. Wait, you asked me a question, let me answer it, right?
Yeah, but we're already on the table. We're getting closer. Yeah, we're not free falling yet.
What?
I have a water bottle on a table. Is it accelerating?
If you were asking me what's really going on, the bottle is accelerating upwards at 9.81 meters per second squared, right?
How come that I could never find what you say, Barney, and I respect you totally.
Okay.
How come I can't find what you say in any like Google search? Like, okay, when I put something down on the ground, it's accelerating upwards at the gravitational force. You know, how come I can't find that? Now, I like the way you say it because I respect you. And I'd love to think this way. But why can't I find that anywhere else?
I do not know. If you want me, I'll find you the references which explain that. But it's more of a reference. It's not just a reference. I'm not saying it because I heard it somewhere. It's an understanding. It's knowing what inertial frames of reference are and knowing what measurements work which way in which systems, and knowing, for example, that wait, let me finish. Knowing, for example, that if I sit in a car and accelerate and have an accelerometer with me, it will show me an acceleration in the direction of motion, right, as that car speeds up. Yeah. If I have an accelerometer on my table, it will show me an acceleration up. However, if I drop my accelerometer, it will show me no acceleration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's kind of the point I was getting at.
Okay.
So, what frame of reference are you looking at my example of the water bottle on the table? From what frame are you looking at it in? Are you looking at it from my frame or you know, on the ground? Or from a external frame, just to rationalize and tell me the logical stuff that you just said?
I'm looking at it from a four-dimensional inertial frame of reference.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now Chris and Travis, now we know kind of how we need to direct questions to Barney because he's not
Well, the
wrong.
problem is it is completely and purely theoretical. There's no physical demonstration you can do to prove any of this.
I have just given you a physical demonstration of it. Take a tool which measures acceleration, test it by whichever acceleration you deem fit, and then tell me which measurements it shows when it stands still on the table and which measurement it shows when it falls down.
Barney, can I ask you a question? Where did you calibrate this tool?
Wherever you calibrate it.
Where did you calibrate this fourth dimension space tool?
In the fourth dimensional space time.
What tool? Well, what tool are you using?
An accelerometer.
Okay, well that doesn't measure 4D.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
No, it just measures forces.
Right. So
Yes.
how are we proving Einsteinian gravity via aka relativity or bending space time?
Because he calibrated it, Chris.
Aaron thinks that it's because I calibrated it, Chris.
Well, no. So when I say it's all theory in terms of like the thought, so obviously it's a thought experiment. First of all, to drop something on one side of the planet, and then assuming the Earth is a globe, and you drop an antipode on the other side of the planet, you drop something. That's all theoretical. That the reference frame this and this accelerates up, that accelerates down. That's all theoretical. What we do know for a fact that we can prove is things fall down. Some things fall down and some things fall up where we are locally. Right. So I guess my point is it's theoretical in the sense of
Some things fall down and some things fall up?
Yeah.
You mean like helium balloons and stuff?
Right, exactly.
Okay. So
Bubbles.
helium balloons don't fall up. They get pushed out by the air, which is falling down, which is heavier than
Right, but there's no wrestling.
Chris, real quick. Okay, so Barney, I have a helium balloon on my desk, not a water bottle.
Okay.
Which way? Which way should it go?
Up.
Okay, and should the Earth follow it?
Should the Earth follow it?
Yeah, I have a water bottle right next to it, but the Earth is pushing up on the water bottle.
Oh, the Earth is not pushing.
It's accelerating up. Sorry.
No. The Earth is curving the space, right? The Earth is curving space-time. The mass of the Earth and the mass of the bottle and the mass of every molecule, atom, and everything that has mass is curving space around it. Space-time, right? That space-time is curved then in such a way that things moving along their inertial paths, when things are freely moving, parallel lines will intersect. Parallel lines of motion, parallel lines of inertial motions will intersect because they're going through curved space-time. Since the Earth is so massive, it distorts space-time so much that basically everything will intersect its path of motion until it cannot. Those paths of inertial motion will get closer and closer and closer and closer until you reach the surface, at which point the Earth will just push you aside. Whichever side you're coming from, it will just push you aside by the electromagnetic repulsion of its atoms against your atoms. Right?
Got you. I got you. The general description of space-time is this fabric thing with a ball sitting in it, right? That's the general, this fabric grid thing.
That's the
The ball.
description of a gravity.
And
That's an
on the
illustration.
northern hemisphere, maybe you might be right, but on the southern, what we would call the hemisphere, man, things just must be just sucked right down to space time.
No.
That water bottle must be
What's
gone.
missing is that
Or
the
the space
that
time
illustration
stretch
every
over the whole.
every direction simultaneously.
The space time
Aaron,
stretch over the whole
Aaron,
globe, and
Aaron,
how does it
Aaron,
work?
wait.
You tell me.
What you're not understanding is that's only one plane of space-time that you're looking at. It happens in every direction simultaneously around that.
And the direction of curvature is not the one that's described in that image, right? That image, like the
the Einstein.
how far away the distortion is from a flat plane in that image tells you how much the space is curved. But the direction and the fact that it's a plane, those things aren't real.
Where
those
do the other
things
direction and vectors come from?
Those things don't correspond to what 4D space is. For what space?
Where do they come from, Barney?
What do you mean? Where they come from?
Well, if space-time is a fabric, right, and there's a hole with a weight, a mass, which creates what we would call rotation or gravity, let's say. Where do the other vectors come from? The ones you guys are talking about. How can you have a space-time and all vectors at one time?
It's called a field. I don't understand your question.
Are you saying that the fabric that I'm talking about, that space-time fabric, that's the common pictures shown to kids and stuff, right, with the ball in the middle, that's not actually the description of space-time? It actually comes in all directions, right? Space-time does?
Yes.
Okay. How does that not counteract itself, first of all? And how does that not
I'm gonna mute Travis
negate
because
itself
I can't hear you.
in one point, basically? If I have a curvature of space-time to my left and a curvature to my right, am I being pulled to the right or pulled to the left? Which one? Right? I'm just sitting there,
The curvature, that image of a cloth being stretched out, or a two-dimensional cloth being stretched out, and then distorted in the third direction, that is not supposed to represent reality. That's an illustration. That's kind of an analogy which should invoke some semblance of understanding of what it is.
Okay, so tell me what represents reality.
Reality does.
Travis,
it is not distorted. You cannot just imagine it as a bunch of flat planes being distorted to the left and being distorted to the right.
That's what you're explaining, Barney.
Because the thing which is being curved is, amongst other things, time itself, right? How can I show you graphically time being distorted?
You can't. So that's why
the same way you can show us Santa Claus going down a chimney, man. You're not describing reality, Barney. You're describing an idea, and you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to figure out how to explain this impossible idea where things are having multiple vectors and reference frames and inertials and all of this stuff that just, it's not real. I mean, this is like Sean saying to me, poking fun at the ether band. You know what I mean? It's an aspect of incredulity on one part of it. So I mean, we're at an impasse to a certain extent where I I understand that Sean doesn't get it, right? I understand that he
Okay.
doesn't get it, but I'm going to be patient with him to work through it with him, and I think that on our side, we would like, I think, at least a modicum of consideration that we're not idiots.
Yes,
And
and
that,
I think that I am trying to do that to the best of my ability. Some concepts are hard to grasp. Some concepts are hard to explain. I do not have a visual aid which will help you see a four-dimensional object.
Right,
I
but
cannot,
I do.
right?
I can show you the ether band. You can't show me space-time. You can't show me multiple vectors in one
Let's back
object.
that up. You can assert the ether band.
No, I can demonstrate it. I can demonstrate it. You see it all the time.
So
you can't demonstrate. You can without evidence. I'll let you get back to Barney though.
Let's rewind back 120 years, right? There is no Einstein. This thing has not been proposed yet. There are things that we don't know about the universe, and we strongly believe that space is three-dimensional and that time is a completely separate thing which ticks on linearly and same for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And then you start uncovering the laws of electromechanics. How do electromechanics work? And some of those laws literally don't fit together in that framework. When you make a prediction and measure it, that doesn't happen. Whichever description you try, it doesn't happen. And somebody proposes a four-dimensional framework, and that
based
framework,
on what? Hold on.
Wait. On speculation, on fantasy, right? Somebody proposes it literally out of whim. A flat earther comes along. A mystic comes along and says, "Try to calculate that thing in four dimensions," right? And you calculate it, and everything works out. All of the things that didn't work out, all of the things that you couldn't explain and couldn't fit into it, now work out. However, it makes these really, really wild predictions necessarily. Like, if that is so, then light needs to curve around stars and space-time itself needs to wobble if things are moving fast enough. And clocks, the same identical clocks, if you put them together and they work perfectly in sync, if you move them into different regimes, will get this better. And these things are all crazy and illogical, but you try them out. All of these things which necessarily are conclusions of that wild theory. And all of them pan out in reality. All of them, before you knowing about them, are accurately predicted by that model. You now know more about reality than you did before. And the only reasonable conclusion is my perception of reality is insufficient. It is wrong. It is too simplified to grasp what is really going on. The thing that is really going on is one level above what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, but if you are the creator of that fourth dimension, you create the reality itself. So you skipped over a really important factor, and that is the discovery of the fourth dimension, not the musings of thinking. Well, you got to think differently about this. Move outside of the three dimensions that you think of and talk about the fourth dimension, where there is no fourth dimension. So how are we going to do this? Well,
but all of the four dimensions were known before we combined them, right? 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time are not like Do you agree that three
Time-
dimensions of space exist?
Yeah.
Time is not.
And do you agree that time exists?
No,
Time is a
construct of
time is a
The
time is a
human construct
measurement.
of time.
No.
Time
no,
is a
Yes,
measurement of
Barney, good
activity.
one.
No, you're thinking what time is it? 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. But the
No,
duration
no,
between
no,
start
that's
and
not what I
finish of
said.
something is
No,
time as well.
no, yeah, that's what I said, Sean. I said time is the measurement of activity.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Really? So there is no time if you...
I didn't know it was different than the clock on the wall.
Hold on, Barney's saying something.
Well,
Why are you? I'm not sure why you're laughing.
I actually
I'm
agree
laughing.
with you in
I'm
some
laughing
respects.
at it.
But yeah, the temporal distance between events is time. The thing which makes some things be in the past, some things be in the future, and some things be in the present. The thing which says that something has happened after something else, right? All of that is time. Directionality of time is defined by entropy. But you do agree that time is real, right?
As a
If you're going to
measurement of
add time
activity.
as a dimension, you can add as many dimensions as you want. Then it's
Yeah,
just ridiculous.
time as a measurement of activity. Yes, I can see that that's what it is. Yes.
Yeah, man-made,
You-
Travis. Yeah, man-made dimension of activity. Yes. We can put a scale on time, but
And can you put a
time
scale on
without a
space?
scale, time without a
Can-
scale is unmeasurable. It just keeps going. It doesn't matter if you're alive or not, right, Barney?
Yes, and
I
space
agree. I don't think you realize that that's following what Barney's
space
saying.
without a scale is also unmeasurable.
What's that?
And you can also put a scale onto space. Like if you don't measure distances, you don't know what the distances are.
I don't know because I move around in space. Actually, I have this space, I have that space. I actually move around.
Yeah,
in
but how
what we
far
call-
is it from
Yes,
one room to the
and
next?
this beginning of this sentence is previous to this end of this sentence. These things are separated in time.
Right, but Barney, that stuff is I guess I'm gonna say real. When you start moving outside of that in terms of space, time, and bending and cloth and all of that, that's where you're stepping outside of
I'm not.
our dimension.
Space.
No, they Travis.
Wait,
Real quick, Barney. Sorry. Real quick, Barney. Real quick. Travis,
He's trying to
what
answer.
they're trying to Barney I think can measure is the past, but he can't measure the future. When we talk about time, we can look at the past. We have memories. We have photographs. We have records. We have stuff of the past. But Barney, in this fourth dimension, I believe, and you can correct me, Travis, or Barney, you can continue on. I believe you're going into the future, which is immeasurable, Barney.
It is unavailable
Are you
to
going
us.
back?
Yes, there are distances in space which are unavailable to us as well.
Hey, not according to climate change. You can measure the future.
You can't.
Oh, for fuck's
Let's
sakes,
not get
Maxwell.
distracted on that.
So
How
space is real, and time is real in a different way in our perception. The only thing, I'm not making up new fourth dimension. The only thing that Einstein did was calculated it as though those 4 dimensions which were considered separate are actually interconnected. They have a relationship among movement through space affects how you move through time.
activity calculated, just like Travis said.
Yes, you like potato, popsicle, kangaroo. Like I can say words too. Those words need to
Travis,
have.
Travis said time is activity.
Yes.
Into the now.
Aaron, you can slob his knob.
What's that?
There's no need to go there.
Okay. No, fine. Define time as you choose to do now. And now produce an explanation for the world out of that understanding of time, produce any predictive power about the future, right? That's the whole process that science is doing.
Einstein wanted to make sure that time processed into the future, where Travis and I are saying that time is just right now. Right now. Right now.
There are many different understandings of what space is and what time is. You can express it in a billion different ways, right?
No, I was talking about time. Space is different because I do live in a space. I'm in a shed.
Really?
I'm within an atmosphere. I'm within a container. I'm within, I live my life, in certain spaces. That's space.
I've been trying to get the answer to the question of is Nevada near or far for days now, and nobody can answer me.
Depends where you are. The answer is it depends where you are.
It depends on where you are, and time depends on when you are, right?
No, time does not depend when you are, because you are always right now. You are always right now.
Well, my now was future to me when I was then.
It depends
hold on. No. Now you have to go back into a record, right? You have to go back into a some sort of historical thing, which might be your memory.
Good. So you're
and say, "Oh, I was there then, but now I'm here now."
You just described time.
So you're a presentist, and that's fine, right?
Wait, is that like only living
Past
now?
does not exist. It is just a memory of things that were now sometimes before, and the future does not exist yet, and it has not yet happened. You subscribe to the A theory of time, you're a presentist. That's fine.
I'm not Santa Claus. I don't bring presents.
Oh, yes, you do, Aaron. You have no idea.
Maybe I am. You guys don't know.
Your personal understanding is something that I can understand and accept. It is just useless.
What do you mean?
It doesn't let you explain things. It constricts you from explaining things, right?
In reality, not in space. I don't want to. I don't want to hear about stars and all this stuff. But time in the now does allow us to explain things.
Really?
Hey, Barney, can I ask you a question?
What is speed in the now if there is no past and there is no future?
I can see clouds gathering on the forefront. So
no,
right
you can't.
now, right
no,
now.
You can't.
So,
right now,
I can
you are
see them
seeing
right
the static
now.
image.
So I can project into the future, my own future. Nobody else's.
Would you look at that?
That possibly.
Oh, wait,
listen, Barney.
Wait,
listen, Barney.
Aaron. You're gonna get
that
very drunk and say something stupid at towards the end of this time. I can predict that.
No. You can't predict. You can't predict. You can project. Only I can project because I see it. I see the clouds.
Oh, I see you getting hammered.
Right. But you can't predict my weather. No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, but that's a personal observation.
No. I can predict. Oh, that's right. Give me about 10 minutes. I know where you live and what the conditions.
You know what's funny about that observation too, is over there where the clouds are gathering. It is now. It's now where they are, right?
I have a very.
It's not predicted fourth dimension time. It's now.
Maybe.
Where those.
Aaron has done a very good job making everything up.
I have a very distinct feeling that Aaron is not interested in the answer.
I have a feeling that my prediction is coming true.
I like you and Travis going back and forth. That's pretty cool. All right, go ahead. I'll back quiet.
Now,
why did you stop back and forth?
There are many ways in which we can conceptualize space and time. That's not a problem. We have brains which are capable of conceptualizing things in many, many different ways. Some of those are more useful, some of those are less useful. Some of those are more accurate, some of those are less accurate, right? Those things which allow us to which coincide with reality the most, with observations past, present, and future, are who can I Ellie, I'm sorry, I'm gonna mute you. You have some background noise. You can unmute yourself later. So those things that we can describe in our past, present, and future, if they correlate to reality, if they are actual, if they turn out to be correct, are describing reality. If they are wrong, then they are wrong, and if they don't describe reality, then they are useless. The model which you are proposing is fine for your personal understanding. It is just useless if you're trying to describe how things work on a greater scale. The thing that we have found that Einstein has discovered by testing, by thinking it through, by comparing it with the electromagnetics, and is that when you consider space and time as connected and calculate things as though it's a four-dimensional construct which is curved, then you can describe all the things that we see and predict all the things that we didn't know before then. Therefore, it is equally as accurate as your concept of the world, and then more so, right? That is why we consider it reality. Because it does everything that you see, everything that you see in how things behave on your scale, in your frame of reference, in your local space, that Einstein coincides with perfectly. And when you look where you haven't looked before, you will find that Einstein explains that as well, even though you haven't seen it yet, right?
Barney, would all these exactly what you just said? I agree. Would that work on a flat Earth?
Yes. Oh, the Earth wouldn't be flat, but yes, you could bring a four-dimensional model to a flat Earth.
That's
you would have problems with rigidity and structure and theoretically, like a lot of these things which are presented as contentious. Does gravity exist? Does that make a difference for whether the world is flat or round? Well, it would be a consequence of gravity that the Earth is round, but if the Earth was flat, gravity could still act on it the same way without proving anything.
Or the force that we, or not the force, but the acceleration that we call gravity could exist on a flat Earth, right?
Yeah.
Actually,
you could have a pancake. You could have a pancake which is accelerating at that speed through space upwards, and beings on that pancake would experience the same gravity that we do.
Meaning
actually, no, they'd still experience tilted gravity at the rim. Their vector, there's some vector diagonal at the rim.
Brian, if you account that the gravity is an attraction between masses, yes. If you're just trying to account for the things falling down to Earth and how accelerometers measure those speeds, you could have a world with no attraction between masses and a plate rising up through space at a constant acceleration, right? And there would be no difference.
I was only happy. No. I thought you said if you grant gravity on a pizza.
Yeah, but then the Cavendish experiment wouldn't work.
Correct.
Right?
Barney, I have a question.
Go ahead.
How come in the Cavendish experiment, if it's mass attracting mass, why don't we use like lead bars, or maybe a ball and a lead bar, How come nobody does that? Why do we have to use spheres in the
Because
Cavendish?
no, it's not about the shape. It's the what you use. So that magnetism can't play a factor.
So
Okay, maybe not lead bars, steel bars, whatever, non-magnetic, non-ferrous material.
lead bars are non-magnetic. So
Yeah.
the reason why we use spheres instead of any other shape preferentially is the accuracy of measurement. If you it is not the sphere which is attracting the other sphere. Every atom of that sphere has its own gravitational field, and it is interacting with the gravitational. Wait, let me finish. It is interacting with the gravitational field of every individual atom in the other object. However, if you arrange those atoms in a sphere, it comes out that the things which are farther away and the things which are nearer and the things which are to the side all even out, so that you can treat the whole sphere as though it is one point of that, which has the mass of the entire sphere, right? If you have an object of any other shape, then you will get aberrations depending on the directions. You will no longer have one point. You will have a line or a three-dimensional distorted field, and your accuracy will go down.
Is there a record of this elimination of these variables, Barney?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did Cavendish record his elimination of all of the failures of the shapes that he tried before he got to spheres?
That was not derived experimentally. That is.
So how do you know that what you just told us is true?
How do I know?
The sphere is much easier.
How do you know that?
It deductively follows from the description of.
How do you know? How can you prove that?
How can I prove that? I can take a non-spherical object and observe what the aberration will be. But I really don't need to do that. It deductively follows from the description of gravity.
So you just think about it, and it's true?
Yes.
No.
It's called logic. It's called deduction. The deduction is the process in which deduction is a truth-preserving process. If your premises are true, your conclusion will necessarily be true if you follow the laws of logic.
So your major premise is incorrect, right? Your major premise is incorrect, so then all of your minor premises are going to be incorrect as well. So you've started off on the wrong foot to begin with.
How?
What's your minor premise? You're telling me that you have a logical argument of deduction that ends up as a sphere for the perfect measurement of what you want to measure. What's your minor premise?
So the laws are deduced from the the laws are
mass attracts mass.
No. Yes, but the laws are extracted from observations, right?
What is your minor premise? That you're just simply stating you're stating a secondary issue. I'm asking you how you arrive.
Wait. Yes, and if you interrupt me in the middle of my sentence to clarify your question was well posed and it is clear. You just need to let me answer it, right?
Okay. All right.
So the premises are the laws. The laws are derived by observation, right? If those laws hold, then all of their consequences necessarily need to hold. If those consequences do not hold, then those premises are wrong. That is the scientific process,
yes,
right?
You're describing a syllogism, Barney. I'm asking you for a stated minor premise. Don't describe the syllogism and the mechanics of syllogisms.
The premises are the force of gravity is proportional to the masses of the objects and inversely proportional to the square of the distance, and the force is equal to the mass times acceleration.
And how
Regardless
do
of
Newton's laws.
Okay, so two things. I'm going to say the first thing is you're assuming gravity. Okay, so you're begging the question. The second thing is, how do you arrive at a sphere being the perfect measurement of the thing that you're trying to prove, which is begging the question. This whole thing is a begging the question.
How is it begging the question? So the law of gravity. I'm not trying to prove gravity. I'm trying to explain why the sphere can be treated as a point object in the explanation of gravity. Gravity is proven by it not literally by observation, by measuring which things affect it and don't affect it, right?
Let me go back, Barney. My
Go ahead.
Assertion was, why don't we use lead bars versus spheres in the Cavendish experiment? Because mass should attract mass.
Mass does, yes.
That's the.
I believe that I have answered that question.
So my question was, why does everyone use balls? Like, why do they do that? Okay.
Because I already answered that question. If you use a sphere, then the distance of the furthest atom and the distance of the what?
Mass attracts mass. What's the difference of the shape? Why does the shape have anything to do with this Cavendish experiment? It's mass.
Because it's not only mass, it is proportional to mass, but it is also inversely proportional to the square of the distance, right?
Sure.
And if you have a shape, then some parts of that shape will be closer and the other parts of that shape will be more distant, right?
Mass? The other parts of the shape will have less mass? So a lead bar has less mass?
No, they will have more distance.
Okay.
He's creating a shape that has equal distance to all points.
Yeah,
as a way to maintain movement.
All right, let's use cubes.
A cube doesn't have equal distance in all directions. It has equal distance at all corners.
I'm back quiet. Go ahead, Travis.
No, I go ahead. Yeah, how do you figure that?
Can I butt in here? Hey, can I say something or ask a question?
Yeah, help us, Ali.
Oh, you don't need any help. You're doing great. Right, but isn't the attraction of the mass is to the center of the object? So it wouldn't matter which shape it was. It'd just be to the center of the mass. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what shape it is, right? Because it's the center of mass that would attract it. So it's not really doesn't matter about the shape, right? And plus lead's magnetic, and plus lead's. Wait a minute. Plus lead's magnetic. Why don't they use wooden balls?
No, lead is diamagnetic. Lead is not magnetic.
It's magnetic.
Lead is not magnetic.
Lead is not, as far as I know, LEB.
Lead's, well, as I say, you may be unaware of the fact that lead is magnetic.
Okay, but Ali
actually.
Go ahead, Travis.
Lead, like gold, is not magnetic. Okay.
I never said gold. I said lead. Lead's magnetic.
I literally
know because you just checked.
Lead, like gold, is not magnetic.
Let me ask a simple question. Let me ask a simple question. It's between me and...
Hey, guys, hang on.
It's between me and Barney.
Hang on. Guys, you got to stop talking over each other. That's all I'm going to say. Just keep that in mind. Aaron.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So my next question. One second. Why don't you use? All right. Okay. No, I'll just shut up.
Yeah, this question was between me and Barney. Where is the center of mass on a lead bar? 3 foot long, 1 inch thick, 3 inches wide. Where's the center of mass?
It's already been described to you that the center of mass isn't the issue here. It's the distance. It's the distance.
Distance from what?
Right? Yeah. You're gonna prove too much here. The distance to what?
The center of mass
of the shape. No, so not everything has a single uniform center of mass, which is equivalent to its total mass, right? If you have a different shape, if you have a distorted shape, that attraction of every part of that object will be spread out, and its resulting vector of force will not coincide exactly with its mass. Because you will have one part of it pushing in one direction and another part of it pushing in another direction. Now, there is one shape, there is one shape where those differences cancel each other out, and that is the shape which holds all symmetries. No matter how you slice it, it is symmetrical, and that shape is a sphere. So every part of it, the distant part and the near part, will cancel out in a way that they will average to the center. And the left part and the right part will average to the center. And all parts of it, every part of it has a symmetry on the other side, so their average is at the center. So a sphere acts as though... No, it doesn't.
Okay, Barney. So I have these spheres.
It depends on how it's oriented.
Spheres.
What?
Listen, I've set up the spheres. I've got my Cavendish, right? I've set up the spheres, and instead of I took the balls and I cut the top half off the ball, and I cut the bottom half off the big ball, and I cut the top half off the small ball, and I cut the top half off the little ball. What would happen right there?
The direction of your force and the scale of your force would start depending on the orientation of the object. What?
It's still a sphere. I just cut off the top, I cut off the bottom. That's all I did.
If you cut off the top of the sphere, it is no longer a sphere.
Well, then, what part of that sphere is the top part is attracting the smaller sphere I have over here? What part of that top sphere?
You're changing
if the center of mass is in
the orientation of the center of mass.
Yeah, well, the center of mass is still there. It's still hanging. It's still right there.
It changed location spatially, though.
And you've changed the mass of it.
Right, but don't miss the punchline that there's still a center of mass.
Yes.
Yes, and it's not necessarily localized to one spot anymore.
It becomes harder to identify the distance of that center of mass, because it depends on the orientation of the object, of the geometry of the object, right? Where with a sphere, it is just the center of the object. If you know its diameter,
very well put.
Boom. Distance from the surface, you know the distance from the center. You know the distance of the center of the mass, right?
Barney, is the top of the ball in my Cavendish experiment, is the top of the ball attracting the top of the ball of the small ball?
Every part of the ball is attracting every part of the small ball.
Okay, all right, here we go. Go ahead, Travis.
Here we go. What do you mean, here we go? Yes, that's literally the definition of gravity. Go ahead.
The top of the ball is attracting the bottom of my small ball. That's gravity. Or is it center of mass?
Every part of mass is attracting every other part of mass.
Okay, so if I have a long lead bar, that's mass. That is mass.
Yes.
It should be right. Okay, so I have a small lead bar over there. I have a small lead bar. And what should happen?
Hold it above your head and see what happens. Let go of it.
I take the bar and beat you over the head with it.
Come on.
Aaron, you're not interested in the answer because it's already been given to you 4 or 5 times now.
Hey, whoever you are, so whatever. Listen, we're having a very detailed, in-depth, theoretical conversation without you. Okay, Barney, go ahead. Travis,
Except
go
you're
ahead.
not listening to the answers and are asking the same question over and over again. Okay, look,
Yeah,
fair
yeah.
enough. Maybe I'm not being clear. Maybe it's a me problem. If you have if you have an irregular object, then the distance to the center of mass becomes relevant to the orientation and the geometry of the shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it gets harder to pin down and harder to measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
With a sphere, all you need to know is the diameter of the sphere and the distance from the surface in any like perpendicular distance from the surface, and it works in any direction. And you will always know the exact distance to the center.
Okay. If I could do a lead bar Cavendish.
You can do a lead bar Cavendish experiment.
Barney, if I could, I can't, but just let's imagine if I could do that.
Yeah.
What aspect would fourth dimension spacetime have on that?
Dog shit. That's what.
Well, the direction of your bar is going to change on each bar. That's what's going to happen, because okay, so your two bars are attracting each other. Say you face them forward, and they start coming together. Well, as they come together, both of them are going to turn, and they're going to continue to turn, because you've added a whole new vector to it.
Yeah, because the mass at one end of the bar is the same as the other end. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, but one end of the bar is more distant than the other end of the bar.
It doesn't matter.
But as they come together, like that, it would basically turn.
If one end of my bar is more, closer than the other, then the sphere on the Cavendish should start spinning, right? Should start turning, because one end of the sphere is further away and it wants to get closer due to gravity. Should start rotating, right? Oh yeah, we should have an axis.
Well,
right?
That depends on the angle of your bar and how big your bar is.
Why does only one side of a sphere contact the other side of a sphere in a Cavendish experiment?
It doesn't. It oscillates. If you know what that means.
It oscillates. It doesn't contact.
So they spin also?
What?
Can I ask a question again? Can I get another question? Yeah.
Go ahead, Alka.
Right. What's the speed of acceleration for gravity? Or what's the acceleration of gravity again?
You're choppy. You're choppy. No, you're choppy. Your voice ain't
good. What about that now? What about now? Better.
That's better, Ali. That's better, Ali.
Sounds better.
All right, okay. Right, Barney, right? Or anybody. Because Barney's in a bad mood with me for some reason. But anyway, so the acceleration, right, of gravity is what? What's the acceleration? Speed? 9.81 meters per second, perhaps. Right. How long did it take
9.8 is an approximate value for Earth, but it depends on where you are.
Yeah, right, okay, forget that. So, but how fast did Cavendish's lead balls slam together?
What? I'm having a real hard time hearing you.
Right, so, okay.
He asked, he asked how fast Cavendish's balls slam together.
They don't slam
acceleration. No, but you said they're right. So gravity is described as 9.81 approximately meters per second squared per second, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, how long did it take for Cavendish's balls to come together?
They don't come together.
They should have slammed. Oh, but they should have. Well, you said it. Well, what was the point of it then?
Ali, you're treating the balls as though the large balls were the mass of the Earth and there was no Earth as another vector.
You guys realize this is being recorded, right?
Yeah, but explain to me again. Explain to me why the balls didn't slam together faster.
Because of the torque of the wire. So
The torque of the wire.
So let's go through the Cavendish experiment.
You're just about to make shit up, Barney. You're just about to make shit up. I'll leave you to it on you.
I'm just about to what?
He said you're about to make shit up, and then he told you to go on and do it.
Ah, okay. So
no, don't. Hold on, Barney. Hold on. Don't entertain that. What he was just saying. Ali B, very good. However, this whole thing started with. Remember, I had a water bottle sitting on my desk. No,
what about it? What am I? What you're deciding? What you're deciding? No, don't entertain. Ask a question.
You're good.
So now you decide. Now you decide what goes on in the hangout. Is that?
Yeah. But you're good. I'm gonna make Barney actually prove it. Right, your point. Okay. This whole question started. I had a water bottle sitting on my desk, and I asked Barney if it was accelerating. He said yes. Okay.
This is the Aaron show. He makes us talk about all his shit, and he doesn't care what we do or say.
Ali B. So Barney said yes, it's accelerating. So when it comes to your balls accelerating together.
Okay.
I want to know because Barney said my water bottle was accelerating.
They were not my balls.
I know. Okay, the balls.
Yes.
Barney said my water bottle was accelerating up. Right? Up. Okay.
Yes.
So I want to hear Barney's explanation of why the balls in your explanation aren't accelerating towards each other.
They are. And then they get stopped by the torque of the wire.
No. Cavendish would never do that. He would never have a torqued wire on it. Come on. Would he?
The experiment
when you put a weight on any kind of wire or string, it will like Cavendish did. Yes, it will have a position in which it's the torque on the wire is the least, and the tension on the string will seek that position. Right? Do you agree with that?
I mean, that's not the kind of experiment I would run, but yes, I guess in Cavendish or any type of torque, tension, pendulum type experiment, you have to deal with that, right?
Yes. So, to get the accuracy that he needed, Cavendish actually utilized that. He used that fact. When you put that torsion bar on the wire, the wire will oscillate around that point of least torque.
How did he know what torque it would take to move that wire?
So when something is oscillating around a point and going back and forth, and you know the mass of that thing, so you know its inertia, you know how much torque is generated on the wire by which angle of twist of the torsion bar, right?
Sure. What's Cavendish's wire untwisting or twisting?
It is doing both. It is oscillating around a point which is
a wire. Barney, a wire is always a twisted pair, right? It's a twisted pair.
Aaron, it is slightly annoying that you interrupt every sentence that I begin.
But I want to clarify, Barney. A wire is a twisted pair, so it could either untwist or it could twist tighter, right?
Yes, and there is a position in which it is the least twisted, right?
No.
The position of least twist, the position of least torque on it, right?
Well, that
you
be
put a weight on it?
That means
Aaron,
it would be
what if he had the wire on ball bearings, so the bearings were
Don't ask me what if. I mean, did he or did
Well,
he not?
you're making the assumption that the wire is twisting.
No.
A wire is always twisted.
No, he could have
Every
used.
piece of string, every piece of wire has a position when it is thought in which it will not put any torque either way. If you move it from that position, you can be twisting it to the left or twisting it to the right. In that position, it is the least twisted. Right?
No, one way would be more twisted.
But
Why
once you
would
put
one
enough
way be twisted?
torsion on that wire, it's going to stay at that position.
Sure, a wire will hang. Yeah, no problem.
Right.
Okay,
But once you add a weight to it and it gets to a point of torsion, then it's going to hold that position. So that's why he. I mean, that's what keeps it from raveling and unraveling. It's already at its point of torque.
Yeah. Put a weight on a wire and then spin that weight up. And then stop it and let it go, and it'll spin back, reach a point of least torsion, and then spin back up in the opposite direction, right? And then it will slow down. It will slow down, stop, and then it will again spin back in the opposite direction, go through the point of least torsion, and go back up. So it will oscillate around that point of least torsion. If you know the mass of the weight, if you know the distance that it is traveling, the angle which it is covering, and you know how much time it takes to oscillate, you have all the components to calculate the torque, right?
Okay, now what if I untwisted that wire, right? I put a weight on it. I put a torsion bar and a couple weights, and I untwisted it, and I twisted it down, right? So
yes,
and then the natural component of the spring metal would be to twist back up, correct? Or to regain shape, to make it, put itself back into its
Why
own
would
shape.
it twist itself back up if you haven't twisted it?
It's the nature of metal to reform.
Then you have twisted it and you haven't untwisted it. When it is most untwisted, means that it causes no torque. It doesn't twist. It doesn't want to twist in any direction. Now, whatever the configuration of your wire is, there is a point where it is most untwisted and doesn't want to go in either direction.
Did Cavendish use one strand of metal?
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. You can do it with a string. You can do it with a solid. You can do it with a solid piece of wire.
No, Barney, I can untwist a string. I can do the opposite of what you're saying. You're saying twist it up, and it'll come back down to its.
It doesn't matter what your objection literally doesn't matter because
keep doing that, right? And it would naturally.
Aaron, stop. Hang on, Aaron. Seriously though, you have to stop asking him something. The second he talks, going on a rant. You're doing it every time, and I can't hear it anymore. Please.
Okay.
Literally, whatever the configuration of your wire is, there will be one position in which the torque to the left and the torque to the right are in balance for that wire, and it doesn't want to go in either direction. Do you agree with that?
I agree with what you've said, yes, because I don't know any further than what you've said, so I agree.
Okay, that position is its stable center point. Regardless of how many strands it has, regardless of what its topology is, there is a position which is the center position. That is the position that I'm talking about, right? Now, that position cannot be achieved with infinite accuracy when you have a large enough weight and a long enough string it will still oscillate gently around that point. You can never get it perfectly fixed, right? That oscillation will tell you what the torque value of that wire is. Because if you know the masses and you know the speed, the path of motion, and you know the time it takes to oscillate, you can calculate how much of a torque force that wire will counter to bring it back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you put a little mirror in the middle on the wire on the torsion bar, and shine a light at it, and measure how much the reflection of that light goes left and right, and you will get your average span. When you add a sphere next to the torsion bar, it will attract the torsion bar, and that oscillation left and right will shift. It will go more to the side of that ball than it did before, and it will do so proportionally to the mass of the ball, of the weight that you've put there. By knowing what the torque was before, you now know how much more of a torque you're putting on the wire by having that weight there.
I think I have a question.
Go ahead.
So even if there was in the Cavendish experiment, let's say you're hanging a sphere of lead or whatever mass, and you have a torsion bar with a couple weights on it, right? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Okay, a couple weights. And what is the difference from what I was saying about having a lead bar, a big lead bar mass versus a torsion bar of mass? Because think about this, Barney. You have a torsion bar with masses on both ends, but only one attracts, right? Only one side attracts, right? Only one ball attracts.
No,
But you have
everything
to have two balls on the small side to make sure it's balanced, right?
Yes, and that's where the part
So
of
what makes one ball attract but not the other? And what is the difference between my example of two lead bars?
it is not that the other ball doesn't attract. It is that the other ball is sufficiently far enough away that
that's not a good experiment.
Aaron, let him finish an answer for once, please.
That the inverse of the square of the distance makes the force on the opposite ball so small as to be insignificant, right? That's the whole point of why you're using spheres, because if your geometry is wonky, oh, for fuck's sakes. Thank you. If your geometry is wonky, you can get wonky results. If your torsion bar is thin enough and the weights are far apart enough, you can calculate how much of an effect they will have on each other, and you can count the further bar as insignificant in that calculation. It is not zero, but it is so much smaller than the force on the near ball that you can either discount it or add it to your error bars. Right?
What is the gravity effect on that outer ball on the other end of the torsion bar as the nearer one is being attracted towards this mass, apparently, and that one is actually moving in the total opposite direction? What is its force?
It is minuscule. Right? It is being attracted in the direction of your weight, and we usually put two weights so that each ball has its own point of attraction, and we put them at distances which are near enough that those attractions are significant, right? Okay. So that we can measure the torsion on the wire.
Yeah, just for the measurements. Because if we tried to do this on a scale where, say, measuring the Earth and the Moon, the solar system, the amount of room that you would need to make that much mass is insane.
Yeah, nobody's talking about that. We're talking about in a room, like a shed, where a man might set up a Cavendish experiment and have one center mass with a torsion bar hanging out there.
Okay.
Can I try to explain this to Aaron, please?
Two smaller weights. As soon as I'm done, yes, you can. Yes, sir. Two smaller weights on the opposite ends of a torsion bar. And apparently one of the weights, the smaller weights, gets attracted to that center mass of the big weight. What's happening to that outer mass on the other end of the torsion bar? What's it doing?
It is also being attracted to the weight,
Jeez.
but
come on.
But
Barney, can I try, because I think Aaron's missing something here.
Go ahead.
He's doing it intentionally, they and them.
Aaron, on the end of the torsion bar, there is the same mass on each end.
Yeah.
There is also placed at the same distance from that small mass a large mass to attract them. So each side of the torsion bar is balanced.
Does the torsion bar have mass?
The torsion bar is usually wood. If you didn't have a significant masses on the end of the torsion bar...
I didn't ask you what it's made of. Does it have mass?
Yes. Negligible compared to the center of mass of your lead balls on the outside of the torsion bar. If you only used a weighted torsion bar, your center of mass would be at the point that it's connected to, and therefore the distance from your larger masses would the force exerted would be smaller because of that increased distance.
Can you calculate this force as something that I feel when I sit down?
Can I calculate this force as something as you sit down? What?
Can you calculate the force as these balls are going towards this your center Cavendish ball as a force that I may feel when I sit down?
No.
I have no idea what you're trying to ask me, or anybody.
Yes.
Yeah, what are you even trying to ask?
I got it. Yes, Aaron, you do feel your ass hitting the chair. That's called weight.
Good job, John. And that's M over little g, or M times little g, right? Little g. Great. Great. That's awesome. So now we know. What your butt cheeks are feeling. So, why couldn't I use lead bars instead of balls?
God damn it, we've been over this 5 times. Stop it.
I just said it. If you
on
Sorry,
the
Sean,
torsion bar, on the torsion bar, not the center of mass, but just the torsion bar part. Now, if mass attracts mass, does a lead bar have mass, Barney?
Yes.
Okay. And is that mass, could it be calculated on a scale? Could you drop it on a scale and calculate it?
Depends. Is it a Sunday mass?
Sure. Okay.
Let's just get through this. Yes.
Let's just say it's a U shape or whatever shape you want, except for a sphere. Let's say it's a cube. Doesn't matter. Would the Cavendish experiment work the same way?
The Cavendish experiment has been carried out with using non-spherical masses on the end of the torsion beam, yes.
Yeah, says you. So
Would it work the same way? It would work the same way. It would just be a lot harder for you to calculate the distance.
why? It's mass v mass.
It's already been described to you that the distance and the locality would be different on the center.
They're the same distance. They're the same locality. I'm not moving bars of lead further away.
They're not. It's calculation of the center of mass.
The center of mass would the center of mass. Oh God, I don't even know where to start with you.
Oh, okay, so are you saying that I'm a sphere? I'm a sphere.
Hang on, Aaron. Hang on, Aaron.
Aaron,
God.
stop.
as the bar were to turn away in its oscillation, you would get a you would have a difference to the center of mass from the part of the bar that is closest.
Center of mass stays the same. Center of mass does not change.
It wouldn't be. Oh God, the distance does. God bless America.
From the center of mass, no, it doesn't.
Wait, hey, if you put it in the same place, so that the center of mass aligns in the same way to the center of mass of the sphere, it could work the same way.
Why would I have to align it, Barney? You said align it. Like, why would I have to align it?
You need to know the distance to the center of mass. It is much harder to calculate the center of mass of an irregular object than of a spherical object, which is symmetrical in all of its cross sections. You're just the reason why we use spheres is to make it simpler and easier to do, because it's complicated as it is. It's hard to do as it is.
I have a great idea.
It will work for any mass. It will work for any mass as long as you can accurately measure the distance, the composition, the distribution of mass of that object.
Okay, I have a great idea, Barney. You might even like this one. What if we put that center of mass, the big sphere, down here, and then our torsion bar was just above that sphere? Right? Would that torsion bar start to twist so that...
Dude, you're an absolutely horrible troll, you know that?
No, I'm asking a legitimate question to a guy.
You were over and over asking the same question every time you...
No. I'm talking about...
At least come up with a new concept.
I'm talking about a Cavendish experiment in the fourth dimension.
At least come up with a new concept.
Maxwell, he wasn't even done describing his experiment.
It doesn't matter.
He's only explained it 10 times.
He keeps coming back to the same point over and over.
No, I have a new one.
Out of new real estate.
This is a new point.
Maxi Pat, calm down.
If I put a sphere over or above or below the torsion bar, the same force would be applied. However, the torsion bar is not in balance vertically. It is hanging by a thread, by a noose, right? If you balanced it vertically, perfectly, then you would get the same measurement and you wouldn't even need a wire, right?
Yeah, Barney, do you understand
the whole setup is because we cannot manufacture things with that precision. So what you effectively have in the vertical direction is something hanging vertically off a ring, right? The wire being connected to the ring. There is a directionality which keeps the bar horizontal. That you're trying to make a seesaw, literally, right?
No, Barney. What I was saying was I would drop the center of mass, the big weight, but my torsion bar thing, instead of being vertical axis swinging, horizontal axis swinging, I would raise it up like a foot. I would raise up, that torsion bar, and see if the ball would rotate and go over the top of that, the mass, the big ball, right?
And again, you're the reason why it is set up this way is to discount the effect of Earth's gravity, so that you do not have to overcome 9.81 meters per second squared acceleration downwards in your experiment.
Upwards. You said upwards.
Upwards.
Yep. My water bottle is going upwards. Right?
Yes.
9.8.
So that you don't have to overcome the gravity of Earth in order to do your measurement, whatever the weight in this balance is, right? When you do it horizontally, when you use a torsion bar hung up by a wire, you you're doing it horizontally, and in the horizontal direction, there is no net attraction of gravity of the Earth. So you can measure very, very fine.
Yeah, that's what the other ball is doing, right? The other ball, not the attractive ball, but the other ball. It's the one that's supposed to be attracted by the mass of gravity by the Earth, right?
Everything in this experiment is being attracted by the mass of the Earth in that downwards direction.
Yeah.
But you just said that it was eliminated.
Yeah, he did. He said it was net zero.
Yes. It is eliminated in the horizontal direction, which is the one that you're measuring by the experiment.
So there's no force pulling on the two spheres.
There is no force in the horizontal direction pulling on the two spheres until you introduce, well, there is the torque of the wire and until you introduce the masses, right?
Until you induce
the
the
torque of
lead
the
ball.
wire,
Yeah, the
the
big lead
torque
ball.
of the wire is stable and symmetrical.
I'm absolutely, again, flabbergasted over hearing this explanation again and again and again, how insanely mad you people are to believe this.
Well, fine. If you feel that way, you can go fuck off.
There's no reason
Breathe it out, Brian.
to curse at me. I'm just telling you that this stuff is absolutely insane.
Right, right. Well,
Insane.
the other reason I joined, Travis, is because I have a question for you.
Sure.
Right. So you questioned Cavendish's ability to remove as many variables as possible before he carried out the Cavendish experiment.
Yeah, based
right?
Based on what Barney was saying, I asked a question that came to my mind. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
What was the question?
What have you done to remove all the variables before you go claiming your ether ban?
I didn't hear a question. I heard you called us all insane. What was the question?
I haven't asked a question right now. Them and they is talking to me about something that he's trying to reverse the burden back on me because I asked you a logical question based on the information you were giving me about.
No.
What is the question?
Are you asking me what my original question to you was?
Yes.
Yeah, before Aaron started to take us off into the middle of Neverland.
Excuse me?
Before Aaron tried to take us off into the middle of Neverland. Yes.
So what point is... I have no clue what you just said or why.
Because Aaron distracted from your point to go through that 20 minutes of nothing. We have forgotten your question. Can you please re-ask it?
Okay, my original question, I believe, said... What other variables did Cavendish, and did he record his elimination of the other variables to arrive at his decision to use spheres? I think that's what my original question to you was. But that's not what them and they or whatever his name is, they and them, didn't even have to give that prerequisite. All he has to do is jump in and just ask me the question. He doesn't have to reverse the burden on me as if asking me to answer his question disproves my question to you.
That is true, and that's
Travis,
why
can you stop us
and move the conversation onto more fruitful topics instead of insulting each other.
I don't think I've insulted anybody. I'm just trying to explain.
You've just called us all insane.
With good reason. Yeah, with good reason.
Okay. Travis, can you stop with the word question and please answer my question?
Wait. I just want to make sure. Travis, this is not in with intention to offend. This is just a measurement of how do you perceive things. If I believe that I have good reason to call you an idiot, does that stop it from being an insult?
Travis, go back to your question. The original one about...
no, I'll answer Barney's question. I'll answer Barney's question. I might not be able to see my idiocy, and so you are able to see through whatever facade I might be putting up, and rightly so, call me an idiot for behaving or believing the way that I do. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but you're not an idiot, Travis. It's okay, and neither is Barney. Everything's
I
okay.
know that. I know that.
Yeah, I'm just testing that insanity claim.
I think you're all idiots.
All right.
I like.
Oh, we are.
Aaron, stop.
They and them. Go ahead.
Yeah. Guys, go ahead and they and them. Go ahead and finish your question, and
Wrap it
Travis
up.
can respond. Yeah, I'm going to be wrapping it up within the next few minutes.
All right. So, Travis, the burden of proof is on you whether you like it or not. But you've claimed that Cavendish did nothing to exclude as many variables as possible before carrying out his experiment.
I asked the question.
I am asking you the same question. What have you done to remove the variables from your claim of the ether ban?
I haven't performed any experiments. I'm making observations.
So you've done nothing. So therefore, you have nothing to prove your ether ban. It's just word salad.
But that's a completely different topic than what we're talking about.
It's observation.
Sorry, Dave, but that really is just a completely different topic than what we're talking about.
Exactly, Barney. Yeah, whoever was talking before, that old man. Travis has done observations. That's it.
Aaron,
he
calm
has
down.
named his observations.
Aaron, seriously, calm down. And well, I'm going to go ahead and finish it out. So I'm going to let everyone go ahead and do their final says. But I'm going to do it differently than Jose does. I'm starting from the bottom, bitches. Go at it, Barney.
How am I at the bottom?
You're not using your Barney account.
Jose goes alphabetically.
Yeah, but
we're going
into
alphabetical.
But you're.
Oh, fuck, I am at the bottom. I'm veteran. Okay. I see it. So the answer to the question being posed through this long-winded explanation of how the Cavendish experiment actually works is, why is it a sphere? It is a sphere because that is a shape which is symmetrical in all of its dimensions, so you don't have to worry about a shitload of other things when doing your calculations. You can just concentrate on what the distance and the diameter of the sphere is. That makes the experiment simpler to perform. The experiment is hard and complicated as it is. There is literally no need to make it more complicated by adding more things that you need to calculate. There is no process of elimination where he tried it with a cube, tried it with a triangle, tried it with a dodecahedron. No, he used the simplest shape to get the simplest result. That's all there is to it.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. They and them, you're up.
Thanks for letting me on, Sean. And if Travis and Aaron are actually interested and actually go and read the full Cavendish papers, you will see that he did a hell of a lot of work before he decided to carry out the experiment in the way in which he did.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Travis. You're up. Okay, there you go.
The thing that I think I would like to say is just that my question to Barney about minor premises up to the major premise, I think, is still left unanswered. He began by assuming gravity in his minor premise, and I believe that that's begging the question. But it's been a while since we had that discussion, but that was the thing that I remembered about it. So there you go. It's late.
All right. Well, so to answer that, I mean, you guys will probably end up talking before I go live tomorrow, but I'm willing to go into gravity, so keep that in mind. Sean Smith, you're up.
Oh, thanks, Sean. Yeah, this was a great night. We went over AI and general AI, and the that overall topic. I mean, we went on for quite a while on it. Pretty interesting. It makes you think a lot about what could happen. Yeah, I mean, other than that, it was a great night. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. And again, I'm going to message you in Discord. I want to talk to you about something about the art and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Maxwell, as much as I don't want you to, you're up.
I got nothing. I think we're all idiots.
I agree.
We're all idiots. I'm an idiot too.
Yeah, you were definitely included. You're up, Brian.
Damn right.
Oh, my turn. All right, cool. God, what do you say? No, I had a good time during the show. I say got heated a couple of times. I do apologize for that. But I say it's just one of those things to where sometimes things don't always go in a way that is conducive to good behavior on all parties. Point in case when Aaron decides to go off on his tangents that he asks the same thing over and over again. So just got frustrated. Other than that, great show. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. And Aaron, or actually Big Blue. Damn, my bad. Blue, you there? Not sure if you were just listening in. Go ahead, Aaron, and if Blue unmutes, we'll let him go.
Yeah, thanks, Barney, for being patient, and thanks, Travis, for giving your opinion also. The other folks on here, I'm not too sure about. I really do like asking questions over and over again so that I can get an answer directly from an expert, not from your freaking panel like the guy that was just on, Sean Smith. But
Wow.
Travis, who's done observations, Barney, who's done, he's educated, and so you know what, it's been a good show, and I do appreciate you, Sean. Thank you.
Well, thank you, my friend. I guess Big Blue was muted in a way, but go check out him out on his channel. I'll go ahead and let everyone
No
know.
thanks.
Shut up, boy! Damn it! Hey, I heard you
It's
take
alright.
those digs at people. I don't even know why you're taking digs at Sean. He was been painting this whole time, asshole. You need to. You know what you need to do, Aaron? You really need to figure out who sounds like what. Because I think you called someone Ali. You're calling Ali B Al K.
Yeah, I called LED. Okay, I'm sorry about that,
You just
LED.
have
I'm
no
sorry about
voice recognition. It's crazy. But thank you guys. I do appreciate you guys being here for real. I was gonna say I got a couple things I was still gonna do my little rant on. So if you guys wanted to hear that, you guys can go to the watch page for it because I'm gonna go ahead and close out this meetup. But again, I do appreciate everyone that's on the panel. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, so get done that. Let me go ahead and close out this panel. There you go. Now, I kind of wanted to do like I'm pretty sure everyone noticed about usually about the last 20-30 minutes of every stream I kind of just go quiet. Believe it or not, I'm listening because it's hard for me to be in a conversation, be in the chat, and then take everything in like non-bias wise. If I'm in the argument, so I take myself out of it. One of the things that I did notice and I wanted to bring up, and it was brought up a second ago by Brian, about the way we react to these things, and it kind of goes along with why I want and demand respect when you're talking to people, flat or globe, does not matter. Our reaction to things it's very hard to keep ourselves in order. I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. Everyone, you guys all know, I get triggered very easy. It doesn't take much. If I don't notice it, I'll go off the handle right away. But I'm also the guy that demands respect on panels, period. I can honestly say, and I feel confident in saying that regardless of, if I get triggered, I'm respectful still. I mean, I think I should be able to ask, seek, and find in my chat right now. As much as we dislike how each other thinks, I don't think I've ever been disrespectful to you, nor have you been to me. So that's kind of proof that the idea of disrespect gets you anywhere. Doesn't. You can still have your own opinion. You can still tell someone like Seek and Find how clueless he is without having to be disrespectful about it. But with that said, guys, another thing I wanted to talk about, I have little notes that I was jotting down. One of the things I think I was hearing them and they and them was saying, burden of proof was like on Travis. Flat earthers say the opposite. I want to correct that. Burden of proof is on yourself. I don't give a fuck if you or them or he or she believes what I do or understands what I do. If your goal is to make others convinced of something, you're not here for the right reasons. Understanding it yourself is the ultimate burden. Understanding what you need to know if it's reality or if it's just what you believe. But the reality of it is burden of proof shouldn't be on one side. It's on both sides. And even better, it should be on yourself before you're trying to convince everyone else. With that said, guys, I'm going to get out of here. See you guys tomorrow. Thank you for being here. Peace.